The past is full of structures that should have become ordinary with time, yet somehow they never did. Centuries of study have given them names, dates, maps, and explanations, but certain details continue to resist certainty. A wall follows a direction no one can fully explain. A monument belongs to several different periods at once. Massive stones stand where their exact age remains uncertain, while buried foundations suggest that some places may have changed long before their final form appeared. These are not mysteries because nothing is known about them, but because the evidence refuses to tell one simple story. Today, we journey through ancient places where every surviving fragment brings us closer to the truth, while reminding us how much of the past still remains beyond our reach. In a remote mountainous region of Tripura, where nature has preserved its pristine beauty for thousands of years, there exists a place that makes anyone who sets foot there pause and stare in silence. Not because of grand architecture, nor because of the remains of a great civilization recorded in history, but because here, among colossal basalt cliffs, lies a rock-carving complex so strange that it challenges every reasonable explanation. The Unakoti rock relief complex resembles a message carved directly into the earth, yet the sender has vanished, leaving behind no clues except for the gigantic divine faces silently watching the world. There are no ancient texts describing its construction, no records of the artisans who worked on it, and no evidence of any dynasty or religion powerful enough to create such a monumental site. All that remains are the statues, the reliefs, and the questions that only grow deeper the more one observes. What do you think ancient artisans used to carve those massive deity figures directly into hard basalt cliffs with such incredible precision? Share your theory in the comments below. Although Unakoti exhibits many features that make it a large-scale historical mystery, the aspect that troubles researchers most is the presence of massive deity sculptures carved directly into the mountainside. These are not stone blocks shaped elsewhere and assembled into place, nor are they made from softer, more manageable types of stone. Here, the ancients chose the most difficult method. They carved straight into the mountain, using the sheer vertical rock face as their canvas. Standing beneath the more than 10-meter tall image of Shiva, one feels as though standing before a gateway into a world of giants, for the monument's proportions far exceed what we usually attribute to ancient craftsmen. Every line is sharp, even, and balanced. The face, beard, crown, everything is sculpted with a precision that today's machinery would have to measure carefully to replicate. The real problem is this: how did they do it? Where did the artisans stand to carve something this large? What did they climb on? What tools created such deep incisions without damaging the surrounding stone? And more importantly, how did they maintain accurate proportions for the entire sculpture while working on an uneven cliff face, without measuring grids, technical drawings, or any chance to correct mistakes? A single misplaced strike could ruin the entire figure, yet nearly all carvings at Unakoti show no signs of error or revision. The smooth curves, consistent depth of incised lines, and polished surfaces all suggest that their technique was not only advanced but also stable, repeatable, and possibly part of a skilled tradition completely unknown to us today. Many theories have been proposed to explain how ancient artisans created the enormous deity sculptures at Unakoti, yet all of them reveal significant weaknesses. The idea that bamboo scaffolding was used is quickly dismissed, as bamboo would be too unstable on steep, slippery, moisture-soaked cliffs. Outlining the figures with charcoal or minerals also fails to answer the most crucial question: how did they control carving depth to produce such sharp, three-dimensional details? Some scholars suggest the use of an ancient measuring frame, but no archaeological evidence has ever confirmed the existence of such a device. The complete absence of tool traces has led many experts to believe that the technique used at Unakoti may far exceed what is recorded in the region's known history, almost incompatible with the technological capabilities of that era. An even stranger mystery lies in the positioning of the sculptures. Many are carved in locations that even today, with safety harnesses, climbing gear and modern equipment, require remarkable skill and courage to reach. How did ancient workers stand to create these high reliefs? How did they maintain precision while their bodies dangled or balanced on slippery rock surfaces? There is no concrete answer, for no traces of scaffolding remain, no carved footholds exist, and no signs of specialized metal tools have been found. It is as though the ancients possessed another method entirely, a technique lost and never passed down to later generations. The challenge was not only the location but also the stone itself. Basalt is far harder than the types commonly used for sculpture in ancient South Asia. Carving basalt without advanced iron or steel tools is nearly impossible if one hopes to achieve the level of detail seen at Unakoti. Yet the carvings feature extremely fine, sharp and deep lines. This has led some researchers to wonder whether the artisans once possessed some kind of special tools that no longer survive, and certain fragments bear signs of abrasion by materials harder than basalt, though what those materials were remains unknown. Others speculate that they may have used a secret metal alloy, an idea with no evidence yet often repeated simply because no other explanation fits. Beyond technique, the scale of the entire complex raises further questions. The name Unakoti means one less than a million, referring to the legend that nearly 1 million deities were turned to stone by Shiva at this site. While the actual number is smaller, it is still vast enough to perplex archaeologists. Why would such a remote area contain so many sculptures? There is no trace of an ancient city, no evidence of a major pilgrimage centre, and no signs of a population large enough to support or maintain a project of this magnitude. For what purpose were these carvings made? Worship, commemoration, a ritual now lost to history. Some reliefs feature smooth, detailed artistic styles, while others display sharper, more angular lines, possibly the products of different periods. This suggests that Unakoti may have been created over many generations, but if so, how did the artistic style remain so consistently unified? How could multiple generations of artisans maintain the same techniques when no recognized artistic school existed in the region? If this truly spanned centuries, then Unakoti must have been the greatest artisan training centre in the area, yet such a centre left no archaeological trace at all. Scattered throughout the site are unfinished carvings, a face with only its outline shaped, an incomplete arm, or a partially chiselled surface abruptly abandoned. These remnants raise a haunting question. What happened? Why did the work stop so suddenly? There are no signs of war, no recorded natural disasters, and no evidence of population decline or mass migration during relevant periods. It appears that some sudden event occurred, significant enough to halt the entire operation at once, never to be resumed. Yet what that event was remains unknown. Today, when sunlight strikes the reliefs, making droplets shimmer across the carved surfaces, Unakoti radiates both grandeur and melancholy. It resembles a gateway into a lost chapter of history, a story whose characters have all disappeared, leaving only immense stone faces watching over the land. These sculptures are more than works of art. They are messages from the past, as reminders that certain knowledge, techniques and secrets once existed but were never recorded. Standing before the colossal image of Shiva, one cannot help but wonder, what did the ancients know that we have forgotten today? Perhaps the silent stone faces are already answering, Some truths belong to history not because time preserves them, but because humanity no longer remembers how to interpret them. Rising from the shallow turquoise waters off the island of Pohnpei lies one of the most enigmatic archaeological sites ever discovered in the Pacific, Nan Madol. Often described as the Venice of the Pacific, this ancient complex consists of more than 90 artificial islets separated by a network of canals, all constructed from immense basalt columns stacked into towering walls. Archaeologists generally date the construction of Nan Madol between the 12th and 16th centuries, during the rule of the Sodelur dynasty, yet despite decades of research, the technological methods used to build this extraordinary city remain deeply mysterious. The site's submerged foundations, colossal stone architecture, and puzzling construction techniques have led many researchers to regard Nan Madol as one of the greatest unsolved engineering puzzles of the ancient world. At first glance, Nan Madol appears almost impossible. The entire complex covers roughly 80 hectares and was built atop coral reefs and shallow lagoons just offshore. Instead of constructing on solid land, its builders created artificial platforms by filling sections of the reef with massive quantities of coral rubble and stone. On top of these foundations, they erected enormous walls made from prismatic basalt columns, each resembling a gigantic log. Many of these basalt beams measure between 5 and 7 meters in length and can weigh anywhere from 5 to 50 tons. When archaeologists estimate the total amount of stone used in the complex, the numbers become staggering. Hundreds of thousands of tons of basalt were required to construct the walls, temples, courtyards, and tombs that make up the city. The engineering challenge becomes even more astonishing when one considers that the people of Pohnpei during this period possessed no metal tools, no wheeled vehicles, and no known system of cranes or pulleys. The architecture of Nan Madol is also remarkably sophisticated. The basalt columns were stacked in alternating layers, forming interlocking patterns that resembled giant wooden log cabins. This crisscross technique provided extraordinary structural stability, allowing walls to reach heights of up to 8 meters and thicknesses of several meters. Even after centuries of exposure to tropical storms, ocean tides, and earthquakes, many of these walls remain standing today. Some of the most impressive structures can be found in the royal sector of the complex, particularly the massive enclosure known as Nandawas, where towering basalt walls surround what archaeologists believe to be the burial site of Sodelur rulers. The precision and scale of this construction has led many researchers to compare Nan Madol with other megalithic achievements such as Puma Punku in South America or Stonehenge in Europe. Yet there is one crucial difference. While those monuments were built on stable land, Nan Madol was constructed directly above the ocean, making its engineering challenges far more complex. The modern rediscovery of Nan Madol began during the 19th century when European explorers and missionaries recorded descriptions of the ruins. Serious archaeological study, however, did not begin until the early 20th century. One of the most influential researchers was archaeologist William Ayres, who conducted excavations and surveys during the 1970s. Later investigations using aerial mapping, underwater surveys, and geological analysis have revealed the extraordinary scale of the site's foundations. Archaeologists discovered that the artificial islets were carefully constructed by piling coral blocks and rubble into rectangular platforms, sometimes several meters deep, before placing the massive basalt walls on top. Radiocarbon dating of organic material found within these layers suggests that construction began around the 12th century and continued for several hundred years. Yet the greatest mystery of Nan Madol remains unresolved. How did the builders transport such enormous stones across the island and out into the lagoon? Geological studies indicate that the basalt columns likely originated from volcanic formations located on the opposite side of Pohnpei. several kilometers away from the site itself. Moving even a single block weighing 20 tons would be a major engineering challenge today, let alone hundreds or thousands of them. Unlike ancient civilizations in Egypt or Mesopotamia, the people of Pohnpei did not use large domesticated animals such as oxen to haul heavy loads, nor did they have advanced metal tools that could easily shape and manipulate stone. Even more puzzling, the basalt columns would have had to be transported not only across land but also across water, navigating reefs, currents, and narrow channels before reaching the construction site. Several theories have been proposed to explain this extraordinary feat. One hypothesis suggests that the stones were transported using large wooden rafts or canoes during high tides. In this scenario, workers may have floated the basalt columns across the lagoon and then lifted them into place using earthen ramps and coordinated human labor. Another theory proposes that the stones were rolled over logs from the volcanic quarries down to the shoreline, where they could be loaded onto rafts. However, experiments conducted by researchers have demonstrated that moving stones weighing more than 20 tons using only wooden rollers would require enormous manpower and highly organized logistics. Some scholars estimate that thousands of workers would have been needed simultaneously, raising questions about how such a small island population could sustain such a massive labor force. Other researchers have suggested that natural processes may have assisted the builders. Basalt columns formed by volcanic activity sometimes break into long prismatic shapes that can be transported more easily than irregular blocks. It is possible that some stones were already fractured and lying near coastal areas where they could be moved more efficiently. Yet even this explanation fails to fully account for the enormous quantity of basalt used at Nan Madol. The precision with which the columns were stacked also indicates careful planning and skilled engineering rather than opportunistic use of naturally available stones. Local traditions offer a very different explanation. According to Pohnpeian legends, the city was built by two powerful brothers named Olosopa and Olosipa, who possessed magical abilities that allowed them to levitate the stones through the air. While modern science obviously does not accept such accounts as literal history, the persistence of these legends highlights an important point. Even the descendants of the people who built Nan Madol consider its construction almost supernatural. In many ways, these myths may reflect the collective memory of a technological achievement so impressive that later generations struggle to understand how it was accomplished. Today, Nan Madol is recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site and continues to attract archaeologists from around the world. Yet modern technologies such as LiDAR mapping, underwater archaeology, and geological analysis are slowly revealing new clues about the site's construction. Yet the central question remains unanswered. Without metal tools, wheeled vehicles, or large draft animals, how did the ancient inhabitants of Pohnpei move and assemble hundreds of thousands of tons of basalt to create a city in the middle of the ocean? Until a convincing explanation emerges, Nan Madol will remain one of the most remarkable and perplexing examples of ancient engineering ever discovered, an enduring reminder that the technological capabilities of early civilizations may have been far more advanced than we once imagined. How do you think the ancient builders managed to transport massive basalt stones weighing dozens of tons to construct Nan Madol, despite having no metal tools, wheels, or advanced machinery? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. The Royston cave carvings have long been regarded as one of the most enigmatic archaeological phenomena in England. A small underground chamber containing such an overwhelming amount of symbolic imagery that researchers are compelled to ask, to which religion, secret society, or long-lost culture did this place belong? The fact that the cave remained entirely buried beneath the ground until its accidental discovery in 1742 only added another dense layer of mystery surrounding it. There are no historical records, no traces of its excavators, and no explanations in any medieval document acknowledging its existence. It resembles a narrow opening into another dimension of the past, where cultural layers interweave and accumulate without leaving behind any clear origin. The carvings inside Royston Cave are unusually dense and crafted in a style unlike any known artistic tradition. In your opinion, why would ancient people deliberately create such a complex and unconventional symbolic system? Share your thoughts in the comments below. What makes Royston Cave especially remarkable is not its bell-shaped underground architecture, nor the theories linking it to secret societies such as the Knights Templar or clandestine monastic groups, but its dense system of carvings covering nearly every surface. This is the most crucial and most difficult to explain feature, the source of centuries of scholarly debate. Royston Cave does not appear to be a place simply decorated with a few religious symbols. Instead, it is a monumental encoded wall with dozens of figures, symbols, scenes, and characters carved so closely together that almost no empty space remains. This raises the fundamental question: what message were the creators trying to record? Was this a symbolic system designed for ritual guidance, or an encoded record of esoteric knowledge? A closer examination reveals something even more peculiar. The carving style inside the cave matches no known artistic tradition in England, whether medieval or pre-medieval. The figures appear both crude and deliberate, with distorted proportions yet purposeful composition. Some sections show refined craftsmanship, while others look roughly sketched by a different hand. Images of saints, kings, queens, St. George slaying the dragon, St. Catherine being tortured, and even pagan symbols all coexist in the tight space, interlaced without any recognizable traditional arrangement. This inconsistent mixture of styles and subjects raises the greatest question about Royston Cave. Was it created by multiple generations, or by a single group possessing an artistic approach that fell outside the flow of history? Scholars wonder why a site supposedly used for secret rituals would contain carvings showing such varying levels of skill. If monks once lived here, could they have produced such a vast and complex network of carvings? If it were the work of a group like the Templars, why does the style not match any known Templar artistic patterns? One bold possibility remains. The creators drew from many sources, or perhaps from no known source at all. Another striking feature is the sheer density of carvings. The walls of Royston Cave contain almost no blank areas. The carvings form a continuous symbolic surface. This differs from typical ritual chambers, where religious imagery tends to follow an organized layout, but here everything appears compressed into the space. Scholars believe the carvers may have been attempting to store a large body of knowledge in a single confined place, perhaps fearing its loss. Others suggest this was a symbolic repository, used for secret rituals, requiring initiates to interpret the overlapping layers of meaning. Beyond their density, the carvings also possess a deeply anomalous character. Some figures gaze toward an unseen point. Others display unusual hand gestures not typical in Christian art. Certain symbols resemble pagan motifs, repeated circles, spirals, or runic-like markings that do not match any known writing system. This suggests the cave may have been used across multiple periods, with newer symbols carved over older ones, yet the wear patterns imply the carvings were created within the same general time frame, or at least using the same set of tools. The walls are unusually smooth, as if the cave had been used for rituals or occupation for a long period before the carvings were added. The smoothing does not resemble marks from modern metal tools, but looks more like stone scraping. This implies that the cave itself may predate the carvings by a significant margin, meaning the carvings form a secondary layer of information imposed on a far older space. If true, Royston Cave is not only an artistic mystery but also a structural mystery. a relic belonging to a time for which no written record exists. Another critical technical question arises: how were the carvings made in total darkness? To date, no evidence of oil lamps, torches, or any lighting tools has been found. There is no soot on the ceiling and no remains of light sources, yet the carvings require visibility, time, and meticulous effort. Some propose the use of mirrors to reflect external light, though this seems implausible given the cave's depth. Others suggest a soot-free flame, though this remains unproven. A more radical theory holds that the carvings were made before the cave became sealed, when its structure was much more open. Features such as the central support column and the curved walls do contribute to the cave's mystery, but they become secondary when compared to the astonishing system of carvings. These carvings are the core of the narrative, the silent language left behind by vanished hands. Every figure seems to pose a question. Why do the saints appear mournful? Why are the scenes arranged without religious order? Why are so many symbols non-Christian? Why does the style match no known form of medieval art? The bizarre artistic style, rough yet intricate, familiar yet alien, has led many scholars to suggest that the carvers possessed a unique esoteric system, a mode of thought external to traditional European artistic frameworks. The carvings may not have been designed to be beautiful, but to carry encoded messages according to a symbolic structure. Viewed symbolically, that Royston Cave resembles a stone scripture, with each carving representing a concept, a layer of wisdom, or a ritual element. This explains the repetition of symbols, the similar yet asymmetric human poses, each possibly a variation of a core symbolic meaning. Despite centuries of study, no one has determined when the carvings were made. Where analysis is inconclusive, stylistic analysis cannot place them within any precise historical period. Even the popular theory linking Royston Cave to the Templars lacks concrete evidence. Everything remains a possibility rather than a fact, and that is precisely what makes Royston Cave a living mystery, a place where history seems to pause while the questions continue to multiply. The Piri Reis map, created in 1513 by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis, remains one of the most mysterious artifacts in the history of cartography. Only a surviving fragment of the original map exists today, yet even this small portion has sparked decades of debate among historians, geographers, and archaeologists. The map was rediscovered in 1929 in the archives of Topkapi Palace, where scholars cataloguing Ottoman manuscripts stumbled upon a parchment drawn on gazelle skin. At first glance, it appeared to be just another early 16th century Portolan chart, but closer examination revealed something extraordinary. The fragment depicts parts of Europe, West Africa, and the eastern coastline of South America with a level of geographical detail that seems surprisingly advanced for its time. What makes the map especially intriguing is that it was drawn only about 21 years after Christopher Columbus first reached the Caribbean in 1492, at a time when European knowledge of the Americas was still extremely limited. Despite this, the southern portion of the map shows long stretches of the Brazilian coastline in shapes that resemble modern maps far more closely than scholars would expect from such an early period of exploration. The most remarkable and widely discussed feature of the Piri Reis map is the astonishing accuracy of certain coastlines, particularly those of South America. When modern researchers overlay the surviving fragment with satellite maps, several sections align surprisingly well with the actual curvature of the continent's eastern coast. For example, the map depicts the bulging coastline of northeastern Brazil and the long downward sweep toward what is now Rio de Janeiro, with proportions that approximate modern geographic data. Considering the limitations of navigation technology in the early 16th century, such accuracy is difficult to explain. Sailors at that time could measure latitude using the altitude of the sun or stars, but determining longitude accurately remained a major unsolved problem until the 18th century with the invention of the marine chronometer. Without reliable longitude measurements, early maps usually distorted the shapes of continents and distances between them. Yet the Piri-Reis map places the western coast of Africa and the eastern coast of South America at distances that roughly correspond to the actual width of the Atlantic Ocean, suggesting that the cartographer may have relied on earlier geographical sources that were unexpectedly precise. The explanation offered by Piri-Reis himself deepens the mystery. In the handwritten notes that appear along the margins of the map, he explains that the chart was compiled from approximately 20 different earlier maps and nautical charts. According to his own account, these sources included ancient Greek maps, Arabic geographical works, and charts produced by sailors who had travelled with Columbus. Some historians interpret these notes as evidence that the Piri-Reis map was essentially a compilation of many earlier traditions of cartography. However, many of the maps he claimed to have used have never been found, leaving scholars unable to evaluate their accuracy or origins. If these lost maps truly existed, they might represent fragments of a much older body of geographical knowledge that has largely disappeared from the historical record. Modern scientific analysis has attempted to better understand the map's technical qualities. Several geographic studies conducted in the 20th century examined the projection and geometry of the surviving fragment. Researchers noted that the map seems to follow a systematic spatial logic rather than random sketching. Some scholars suggested that it may have been constructed using a form of spherical projection, a mathematical method for translating the curved surface of Earth onto a flat plane. If this interpretation is correct, it would imply that at least some of the source maps used by Piri-Reis were based on surprisingly advanced geographic calculations. In later cartographic innovations, such as the projection developed by Gerardus Mercator in 1569, introduced precise mathematical techniques for representing global navigation routes. But the Piri-Reis map predates these widely adopted methods by several decades. The map also contains numerous inscriptions describing how information was gathered. Some notes explain where certain coastlines were reported by sailors, while others describe regions that had only recently been explored. These annotations suggest that Piri-Reis attempted to combine first-hand reports from explorers with older geographical traditions. Archaeological and archival research into Ottoman navigation has shown that the empire possessed an extensive maritime network across the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean, giving its sailors access to geographical information from multiple cultures. In this context, the Piri-Reis map might represent a unique synthesis of knowledge collected from Portuguese, Arab, and Mediterranean navigators during the early age of global exploration. Nevertheless, several questions remain unresolved. Only about 1/3 of the original map survives today, leaving historians uncertain about the full scope of its geographical coverage. The missing sections may once have shown the rest of the Americas or additional parts of the Atlantic world. Because those sections are lost, researchers cannot determine whether the entire map maintained the same level of accuracy seen in the surviving fragment. Moreover, debates continue about whether the alignment of certain coastlines truly reflects advanced geographical knowledge, or whether some similarities to modern maps are coincidental. Some scholars argue that the shapes of the coastlines are still distorted when examined carefully, while others maintain that the general proportions remain impressive considering the historical context. Even today, the Piri-Reis map remains one of the most fascinating puzzles in the history of navigation. Its surprisingly accurate depiction of the South American coastline, the mysterious lost maps that Piri-Reis claimed to use, and the map's unusual geometric structure all suggest that early cartographers may have possessed far more geographical knowledge than historians once believed. More than 5 centuries after it was drawn, and this surviving fragment continues to raise an intriguing question. Could traces of advanced ancient mapping knowledge still be hidden in forgotten archives or lost maps waiting to be rediscovered? In your opinion, where did the astonishing accuracy of the Piri Reis map come from? Was it simply the result of skillfully combining many older maps? Or could it reflect an ancient source of geographical knowledge that has been lost to history? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. The Uluburun Bronze Age shipwreck, discovered off the southern coast of Turkey near the town of Kaş, is widely considered one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries ever made beneath the sea. Dating to approximately 1300 BCE, during the Late Bronze Age, this ancient merchant vessel provides an unprecedented window into the technological sophistication and global trade networks of the ancient Mediterranean world. The shipwreck was first discovered in 1982 by a Turkish sponge diver named Mehmet Shakir, who noticed unusual metal objects scattered across the seabed at a depth of roughly 45 to 60 meters. Shortly after the discovery, a team of underwater archaeologists led by George F. Bass from the Institute of Nautical Archaeology began systematic excavations. Over the course of 11 excavation seasons between 1984 and 1994, divers conducted more than 22,000 individual dives, gradually recovering thousands of artifacts from the seabed. The sheer scale and diversity of the cargo stunned researchers, revealing a snapshot of an interconnected Bronze Age world far more technologically advanced and globally linked than previously imagined. Among the most striking aspects of the Uluburun shipwreck is the sophistication of the ship itself. The vessel was approximately 15 to 16 meters long and constructed primarily from Lebanese cedar wood, a prized material known throughout the ancient Near East for its strength and durability. The shipbuilders used a complex mortise and tenon joinery system, into which precisely cut wooden pegs and joints held the planks together without relying heavily on metal nails. Archaeologists estimate that thousands of these wooden joints were used to assemble the hull, creating a structure strong enough to carry more than 20 tons of cargo across open sea routes. Such craftsmanship suggests that Bronze Age shipbuilders possessed advanced woodworking skills and engineering knowledge comparable to techniques used in Mediterranean shipbuilding more than a millennium later. Yet this remarkable vessel was only the beginning of the mystery. The cargo recovered from the wreck represents one of the most diverse assemblages of ancient trade goods ever discovered. The ship carried at least 10 tons of copper ingots, most of them cast in the distinctive oxide shape that allowed them to be easily stacked and transported. Each ingot weighed around 20 to 25 kilograms, and in total archaeologists recovered 354 copper ingots, most likely produced in Cyprus, the primary copper-producing region of the Bronze Age Mediterranean. Alongside the copper were approximately 1 ton of tin ingots, a crucial ingredient used to create bronze when alloyed with copper. This mixture formed the technological backbone of Bronze Age civilizations, enabling the production of stronger tools, weapons, and architectural components. The presence of both metals on a single ship suggests that the vessel was transporting raw materials intended for large-scale metal production somewhere in the eastern Mediterranean. Yet the Uluburun shipwreck was far more than a metal transport vessel. The cargo included goods from across an enormous geographic area, indicating an extensive international trade network. Archaeologists recovered ivory from African elephants, hippopotamus teeth, Baltic amber from northern Europe, ebony wood from Nubia, Mycenaean pottery from Greece, and luxurious gold jewellery likely produced in the Levant. One of the most famous artifacts is a gold scarab bearing the name of Queen Nefertiti of Egypt, suggesting diplomatic or elite connections between powerful kingdoms of the time. Such diversity implies that by the 14th century BCE, long-distance maritime trade connected civilizations from the Aegean, Egypt, Anatolia, Mesopotamia, and possibly even Central Asia. In many ways, The Uluburan ship can be seen as a kind of Bronze Age cargo vessel, transporting raw materials, luxury goods, and diplomatic gifts across a vast and interconnected economic network. However, among all the remarkable discoveries aboard the ship, perhaps the most mysterious and technologically intriguing are the glass ingots found within the cargo. Archaeologists recovered approximately 175 glass ingots, making them the oldest large-scale shipment of raw glass ever discovered in the archaeological record. These ingots were formed into rounded or bun-shaped lumps of vividly coloured glass, including shades of deep cobalt blue, turquoise, violet, and amber. Chemical analysis revealed that the glass was produced using a mixture of silica, sand, plant ash, and mineral additives, heated to temperatures exceeding 1,100 degrees Celsius. Achieving such temperatures in Bronze Age furnaces would have required carefully constructed kilns capable of sustaining intense heat and precise control over airflow and fuel sources. The most fascinating aspect of these glass ingots is the presence of cobalt-coloured glass, which requires extremely specific chemical conditions to produce. The cobalt pigment likely came from mineral sources containing cobalt oxide, possibly originating from regions such as Egypt or Western Asia. To create a consistent blue coloration, ancient glassmakers had to precisely measure mineral additives and maintain stable furnace temperatures. Even slight variations in temperature or chemical composition could result in entirely different colours or structural defects in the glass. Modern experimental archaeology has demonstrated that producing such high-quality, coloured glass requires remarkable technical knowledge of furnace design, raw material ratios, and cooling processes. The Uluburan glass ingots therefore suggest that Bronze Age artisans possessed an unexpectedly advanced understanding of pyrotechnology. To appreciate how extraordinary this discovery is, it is useful to compare it with other early glass finds. Small glass beads and decorative objects are known from Egyptian and Mesopotamian sites, dating back to around 1600 BCE, but these items were typically produced in small quantities and used primarily for jewellery. The Uluburan cargo, by contrast, represents industrial-scale raw material production, indicating that glass was already being manufactured in bulk and shipped as a trade commodity. In essence, these ingots functioned like ancient raw materials for glass workshops, much the way modern industries transport raw steel or aluminum for later processing. This suggests that specialized production centers existed somewhere in the Eastern Mediterranean, where large batches of glass were manufactured and exported to craftsmen across different regions. The question that continues to puzzle researchers is where exactly these glass ingots were produced, and how Bronze Age craftsmen managed to achieve such consistent quality. Some scholars argue that the glass originated in Egyptian royal workshops, which are known to have produced coloured glass during the reign of pharaohs such as Amenhotep III. Others believe the glass may have been manufactured in Mesopotamian or Levantine centres, where evidence of early glass furnaces has also been found. Chemical isotope analysis of the glass suggests that the raw silica used in production may have come from coastal sand deposits in the Eastern Mediterranean, but the exact production site remains uncertain. This uncertainty has fueled ongoing debates about whether glass-making technology developed independently in multiple regions or spread through trade networks between civilizations. Further archaeological study of the Uluburan shipwreck has revealed additional insights into Bronze Age craftsmanship and trade practices. The ship's cargo also included balance scales and standardized weights, indicating that merchants on board relied on precise measurement systems to conduct trade. These weights correspond closely with weight standards used in the Near East, suggesting the existence of shared economic conventions across distant cultures. Such standardization would have been essential for international trade, allowing merchants from different regions to exchange goods using mutually understood measurement systems. In many ways, This reflects an early form of economic globalization long before the rise of classical civilization such as Greece and Rome. Despite decades of research, many aspects of the Uluburun shipwreck remain mysterious. The identity of the ship's owners is still debated among scholars. Some researchers believe the cargo represents a royal diplomatic shipment, perhaps sent as gifts between powerful Bronze Age kingdoms such as Egypt, the Hittite Empire, and Mycenaean Greece. Others argue that the vessel may have belonged to a wealthy merchant operating within a vast commercial network linking multiple civilizations. The cause of the ship's sinking is also uncertain. No clear evidence of battle or piracy has been found, leading many to suspect that the ship was lost during a violent storm or while attempting to navigate the rocky coastline of southern Anatolia. In your opinion, how advanced was Bronze Age glassmaking technology? And could the Uluburun ship be evidence of an ancient technological network that we still do not fully understand? Share your thoughts in the comments below. From the very first moment one's eyes rest upon that silent rocky landscape, there is an immediate sense that this place is unlike any other ancient site. Hidden deep within the mountains of Chongqing, among moss-covered cliffs and heavy mist that seem to guard the secrets of time itself, the Dazu rock carvings emerge as one of the most extraordinary testaments to the capabilities of ancient humanity. Yet what sets this site far beyond conventional archaeological standards is its immense system of statues and reliefs carved directly into sheer rock faces, surfaces that, even today, would require careful planning and advanced equipment to approach. When standing before colossal figures rising 7 or 8 meters high, suspended upon nearly vertical slopes, one cannot help but ask, how were artisans of the Tang and Song dynasties able to create them? The remaining traces reveal no signs of large scaffolding systems or heavy lifting mechanisms, nor any evidence that materials were transported through alternative routes. The surfaces of the carvings bear almost no rough tool marks, as though the images were printed directly into the stone using a technique entirely unknown to history. Every line, soft folds of garments, fluid contours, and remarkably delicate facial features suggest that these ancient craftsmen possessed stoneworking methods far more advanced than recorded in historical texts. Yet this very perfection only deepens the mystery. How could they stand at such dangerous heights, on slippery rock surfaces carving tiny details without a single mistake? And if wooden scaffolding had been used, why are there no remaining anchor holes or structural traces on the cliff? These questions continue to hang in the air like the shadows of the statues themselves, gazing down from impossible heights. How do you think ancient craftsmen were able to carve such massive statues onto sheer cliff faces without leaving any clear traces of tools or scaffolding? Share your thoughts in the comments below. When one looks away from the colossal statues, another astonishing feature becomes apparent: the unusual religious harmony that permeates the entire Dazu complex. This is one of the rare places where 3 major traditions, Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism, do not conflict but instead intertwine, complementing one another in relief stretching hundreds of meters. On the same cliff, one may see the Buddha seated beside Laozi or Confucius, as if the ancient artisans wish to declare that all spiritual paths ultimately converge. This creates a profound layer of meaning. Dazu is not merely a religious space, but a philosophical center where moral values, teachings, and spiritual concepts are transmitted through visual art. Such interweaving is so rare that it challenges our understanding of religion in medieval China, where each belief system typically held its own domain within society. But the mystery does not end there. Several statues and reliefs display an unexpectedly precise understanding of human anatomy. Depictions of muscles, bones, and even internal structures appear in certain scenes with such accuracy that scholars wonder how the artisans acquired this level of knowledge. At that time, ear practices resembling modern anatomical study were virtually non-existent in Chinese culture, and if they did exist, no written record suggests such detailed comprehension. Some theories argue that these images are merely symbolic, representing spiritual states or deeper philosophical ideas. Yet even so, the anatomical precision surpasses expectations, raising another unresolved question. Did the creators of Dazhu have access to medical knowledge now lost to history, or did they simply possess extraordinary observational skill? The deeper one ventures into the site, the more astonishing the preservation becomes. Sandstone, known for its vulnerability to erosion by water, wind and temperature fluctuations, should have deteriorated rapidly, yet thousands of statues at Dazhu still retain sharp contours after more than 1,000 years. The folds of the garments remain soft and natural, the decorative patterns remain clear, and the deeply carved lines appear almost newly cut. This has led many to believe the ancient artisans applied a special surface treatment technique, perhaps a protective coating or a stone hardening method unknown to us. However, scientific examinations have not identified any definitive protective layer. This absence of evidence only intensifies suspicion that a lost technical tradition once existed here, now entirely erased from human memory. Beyond religious content, many reliefs vividly portray aspects of everyday life: agricultural work, craft production, legal principles, moral lessons, and even family etiquette. Yet some elements do not align perfectly with historical documents of the same period, and certain tools or clothing styles depicted in the carvings belong to eras much earlier, as though the artisans were recording memories of an even older cultural tradition. This raises a compelling question. Are the Dazhu carvings purely products of the Tang Song periods, or do they continue a lineage of knowledge that originated in a far more ancient civilization now lost to time? The mystery deepens further with geological surveys revealing unusual cavities inside the cliff faces that host the carvings. Some experts believe tunnels or hidden chambers may once have existed, perhaps used during construction or for ritual purposes. Yet many of these passages are now sealed by later rock insertions, preventing deeper excavation. If a concealed network truly lies within the cliffs, then it would suggest that the ancient artisans planned their work with a level of architectural sophistication far beyond current assumptions. With all these layers of meaning, the true purpose of the Dazhu rock carvings remains uncertain. Although regarded as a sacred site, many scenes convey not only religious teachings but also philosophy, cosmology, and moral instruction. Some scholars propose that Dazhu might have served as a spiritual education center, with stone art functioning as a teaching medium for ethical and philosophical principles. In this interpretation, the cliffs are not merely natural walls but stone scriptures, an open-air academy created by a civilization determined to preserve wisdom in a material more enduring than paper or speech. Regardless of its original purpose, nothing is more striking than the seemingly impossible technique used to carve massive figures into steep cliff faces. Giant statues appear to defy gravity. Intricate details resemble those produced by modern cutting tools, and the stone surfaces remain smooth with no visible tool marks, making Dazhu one of Asia's greatest architectural enigmas. Each time sunlight brushes across the folds of stone garments or the serene expressions of the statues, observers glimpse not only the artisan's brilliance, but also the quiet secrecy of time itself, as though it still guards a forgotten truth we have yet to comprehend. Perhaps this silence is what makes the Dazhu rock carving so profoundly humbling, not only as artistic masterpieces but as reminders that countless ancient techniques and bodies of knowledge have been lost, lying dormant in stone and waiting for humanity to understand them once more. Rising once above the bustling Mediterranean port of Alexandria, the legendary lighthouse of Alexandria, also known as the Pharos, was not only one of the most famous engineering achievements of the ancient world, but also one of its greatest technological mysteries. Built during the reign of Ptolemy II Philadelphus, around 280 to 247 BCE, the lighthouse stood on the small island of Pharos at the entrance of Alexandria's harbour. Ancient sources describe a monumental structure rising between 100 and 130 metres high, making it one of the tallest human-made constructions on Earth for more than a millennium, surpassed only by the Great Pyramid of Giza. For sailors navigating the dangerous Mediterranean coastline, the tower served as a beacon visible from astonishing distances and guiding ships safely toward one of the greatest cities of the ancient world. Yet despite centuries of historical references, archaeological discoveries, and scientific research, many aspects of the lighthouse, particularly its remarkable light reflection system, remain deeply puzzling. The lighthouse itself was a colossal architectural feat. Classical descriptions by ancient writers such as Strabo and later Arab historians describe a tower composed of 3 massive tiers: a large square base, an octagonal middle section, and a cylindrical tower at the top. These levels were constructed from enormous blocks of limestone and granite, some weighing 20 to 30 tons each. Transporting and precisely placing such stones in a structure more than 100 meters tall would have required an advanced system of cranes, ramps, and lifting technology. Unlike later medieval engineering projects, however, no surviving blueprints, construction manuals, or technical documents describe exactly how the builders achieved this feat. Archaeologists believe the design included internal ramps or spiral corridors that allowed workers and pack animals to transport fuel and materials to the top of the tower. Even with such systems, the sheer scale of the lighthouse raises questions about the logistical organization and technical capabilities of the Ptolemaic engineers who designed it. But the most fascinating mystery of the Pharos was not its size. It was its light projection system, which ancient writers claimed could be seen from extraordinary distances across the sea. Historical sources indicate that the lighthouse operated using a large fire burning at the summit. However, the fire alone could not account for the range of visibility described in ancient texts. According to multiple accounts, the light was intensified by a massive reflective mirror, possibly made of polished bronze or another metal alloy. Some historians claim the beam could be seen up to 50 kilometers away, an astonishing range even by modern lighthouse standards. To understand why this claim is so puzzling, it helps to compare the Pharos to other ancient navigation systems. Most ancient coastal beacons were simple fires or torches placed on cliffs or towers, visible only for a few kilometers. Even in the Roman world, lighthouse technology rarely exceeded 20 to 25 meters in height and relied solely on flame illumination. In contrast, the Alexandrian lighthouse combined height, optics, and reflection, suggesting an understanding of light manipulation far more advanced than typically attributed to ancient engineers. The exact nature of this mirror remains one of the greatest unanswered questions in the study of ancient technology. If it truly functioned as described, the mirror would have needed an extremely smooth and highly polished surface, capable of reflecting a large amount of light without scattering it. Bronze mirrors were known in antiquity, but they were typically small, used for personal grooming, and rarely exceeded a few tens of centimeters in diameter. A mirror large enough to reflect a lighthouse flame across tens of kilometers would have required a diameter possibly exceeding several meters. Producing such a device would demand advanced metallurgical techniques, including the ability to cast large bronze plates and polish them to near-perfect smoothness. Even today, creating large reflective surfaces requires careful control of surface curvature and alignment, Without precision tools or optical theory as we understand it today, how ancient engineers achieved this remains unclear. Some medieval Arab sources even describe the mirror as powerful enough to focus sunlight and burn approaching enemy ships, echoing the famous legend of Archimedes supposedly using mirrors to set Roman vessels on fire during the siege of Syracuse. While modern experiments have attempted to recreate such a solar weapon, the results have been mixed. Concentrating sunlight with reflective surfaces can indeed generate intense heat, but doing so at sea against moving targets is extremely difficult. Nevertheless, the persistence of these accounts suggests that the Alexandrian mirror may have been unusually large and technologically impressive, possibly capable of concentrating or directing light in ways that impressed ancient observers. Whether the burning ship story was a real military application, an exaggerated traveller's tale, or a misunderstanding of the lighthouse's optical system remains unresolved. The mystery deepened in 1994 when French underwater archaeologist Frank Goddio led a major underwater survey of Alexandria's eastern harbour. Using sonar mapping and diving expeditions, his team discovered thousands of massive stone blocks, architectural fragments, and colossal statues scattered across the seabed. Some of these stones weighed up to 70 tons, and suggesting that the lighthouse may have been even larger and more elaborate than previously reconstructed. Among the discoveries were fragments of enormous columns, carved blocks from the tower structure, and statues believed to represent members of the Ptolemaic dynasty. The distribution of the debris indicated that the lighthouse likely collapsed during a series of powerful earthquakes that struck the region between the 10th and 14th centuries CE, gradually toppling sections of the structure into the harbour. Further underwater surveys conducted in the early 2000s mapped the ruins in greater detail, revealing how the fallen stones formed a wide archaeological field across the harbour floor. These discoveries confirmed that much of the lighthouse had indeed collapsed directly into the sea, preserving large pieces of its architecture underwater. However, despite these extensive excavations, no confirmed fragments of the legendary reflective mirror have ever been found. If such a device existed, it may have been removed long before the tower collapsed, melted down for metal, or destroyed during centuries of earthquakes and looting. The absence of this crucial component leaves scholars with little more than historical descriptions and speculation. Comparisons with other ancient structures highlight just how unusual the Pharos may have been. For example, Roman lighthouses such as the Tower of Hercules in Spain, one of the few surviving ancient lighthouses, stand only about 55 meters tall, roughly half the estimated height of the Alexandrian Tower. Similarly, most ancient navigation beacons lacked any optical enhancement beyond simple firelight. The Pharos, by contrast, appears to have combined monumental architecture, maritime engineering, and primitive optical technology into a single structure. This fusion of disciplines raises the possibility that Hellenistic engineers possessed a deeper practical understanding of light reflection and long-distance signaling than historians previously assumed. In your opinion, how did the powerful light reflection system of the Lighthouse of Alexandria actually work? Was it simply a massive polished metal mirror, or did ancient engineers possess a far more advanced optical technology than we assume today? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The Semalu Tash petroglyphs represent one of the largest and most enigmatic concentrations of ancient rock art anywhere in the world. Located high in the rugged mountains of southwestern Kyrgyzstan, in a remote valley of the Fergana Range at elevations reaching nearly 3,000 meters above sea level, this vast archaeological landscape contains an estimated 90,000 or more petroglyphs carved into thousands of dark basalt boulders scattered across the alpine terrain. These carvings span a remarkably long period of human history, with many scholars dating the earliest images to around the Late Bronze Age, approximately 2,000 years before the Common Era, while others were clearly added during the Scythian and Turkic periods more than a millennium later. Despite decades of research, beginning with early Soviet archaeological surveys in the 1950s and continuing with more detailed expeditions during the 1970s, 1990s, and early 21st century, the true purpose of Saymaloo Tash remains uncertain. Its enormous scale, mysterious imagery, and surprisingly advanced carving techniques continue to challenge conventional assumptions about the technological capabilities of ancient pastoral societies in Central Asia. One of the most striking features of Saymaloo Tash is the sheer density of images. Surveys conducted by Kyrgyz archaeologists such as A.N. Bernstam and later research teams from the Kyrgyz Academy of Sciences revealed that the valley contains more than 10,000 large boulders, many of which display dozens of individual carvings. Some rocks contain layered images from different historical periods, indicating that the location remained culturally significant for centuries. When researchers first attempted to catalogue the carvings during Soviet expeditions in the 1970s, they estimated that documenting every figure in the valley could take decades. Even today, archaeologists continue to identify new carvings during fieldwork seasons, because many stones remain partially buried beneath soil, snow, or vegetation. If we consider that creating even a single petroglyph might require hundreds or thousands of hammer strikes, the cumulative effort behind Saymaloo Tash becomes astonishing. Producing tens of thousands of images would have required an immense investment of labour, suggesting that the valley may have served as an important ritual or symbolic gathering place for ancient communities, rather than simply a random collection of drawings. Yet the most fascinating and puzzling aspect of Saymaloo Tash lies in the remarkable precision of its stone carving techniques. Most of the images were created using a method archaeologists call pecking, in which a harder tool repeatedly strikes the rock surface to remove small fragments and gradually form a shape. At first glance, this might sound simple, but close examination reveals a level of craftsmanship that raises serious questions about the tools and methods used by the ancient artists. Many carvings show uniform depths, clean edges, and smoothly curved lines, features that require careful control and repeated deliberate strikes. Some animal figures, particularly the elegant depictions of ibex with long curved horns, display proportions so consistent that they appear almost stylized, suggesting a refined artistic tradition rather than spontaneous scratching. Microscopic analysis of several carvings conducted during modern surveys in the early 2000s indicates that the individual impact marks are often extremely small and closely spaced, implying the use of tools capable of producing controlled, repetitive blows. This level of precision becomes even more impressive when one considers the type of stone involved. Many of the boulders in the Saymaloo Tash Valley are composed of dense basalt or similarly hard volcanic rock, materials that rank significantly higher in hardness than the limestone surfaces found at many other famous rock art sites. For comparison, petroglyphs in regions such as Valcamonica in Italy or Alta in Norway were often carved into relatively softer metamorphic or sedimentary rocks, which are easier to work using simple stone tools. Basalt, however, requires far greater force to shape. Experimental archaeology has shown that carving even a small figure into basalt using primitive stone hammers can take several hours or even days depending on the complexity of the design. When multiplied across tens of thousands of carvings, the time investment required for Saymaloo Tash becomes extraordinary. Some researchers therefore speculate that ancient artisans may have used metal tools earlier than previously assumed, possibly made from bronze or iron during later phases of the site's use. However, direct archaeological evidence for such tools within the valley remains limited, leaving the exact technological process unresolved. Archaeological expeditions conducted in 1956, 1975, and again in the early 2000s attempted to analyse the carving patterns in greater detail. During these studies, researchers observed that certain petroglyph panels show consistent spacing between peck marks, sometimes less than a few millimeters apart, which suggests deliberate technique rather than random hammering. In some cases, the carved surfaces appear slightly polished, indicating that the artist may have smoothed the grooves after shaping them. This observation has led to speculation that multiple stages were involved in the carving process, first outlining the design with lighter impacts, then deepening the lines with heavier strikes, and finally refining the edges. Such multi-step craftsmanship implies a surprising level of planning and skill. When compared with many other prehistoric rock art traditions around the world, the Sayma-Lutash carvings demonstrate a technical consistency more commonly associated with later historical stonework. Another intriguing mystery arises from the longevity and preservation of these carvings. Despite centuries of exposure to harsh alpine weather, including freezing winters, powerful winds, and intense ultraviolet radiation, many of the images remain sharply visible. This is partly due to the formation of a dark mineral coating known as rock patina, which develops naturally on exposed surfaces over long periods. When ancient artists chipped away this outer layer, the fresh stone beneath appeared lighter in colour, creating a strong visual contrast. Over time, the patina slowly reformed within the carved depressions, stabilizing them and protecting the shapes from erosion. However, geologists studying weathering rates in high-altitude environments note that erosion should theoretically have softened many of these carvings more dramatically after several thousand years. The fact that numerous petroglyphs still display clear outlines suggests that the original carvings were made deep enough and precisely enough to withstand extreme environmental conditions. The imagery itself adds yet another dimension to the mystery. Among the thousands of figures are depictions of wild animals such as ibex, deer, wolves, and horses, as well as hunting scenes involving archers and mounted riders. Some panels also include geometric shapes, solar symbols, and unusual circular forms that researchers interpret in different ways. Certain carvings resemble radiating discs or wheel-like patterns, leading some scholars to propose that they might represent solar worship or astronomical observations. Others show stylized human figures with exaggerated heads or elaborate headdresses, possibly indicating ritual costumes worn by ancient shamans. Because the valley contains layers of carvings from different historical periods, the meaning of these symbols may have evolved over time, making it difficult to interpret them within a single cultural framework. In your opinion, what tools or techniques did ancient artisans use to carve tens of thousands of precise images into the extremely hard basalt stones at Sayma-Lutash petroglyphs? Where are you watching this video from? And what time of day is it for you? Share your location and time in the comments below. Hidden within the limestone hills of southwestern France lies one of the most remarkable artistic achievements of prehistoric humanity, Lascaux Cave. Discovered in 1940 by 4 teenagers near the village of Montignac in the Dordogne region, the cave amazed archaeologists with more than 600 paintings and nearly 1,500 engravings covering its walls and ceilings. Radiocarbon dating shows that these artworks were created about 17,000 years ago during the Upper Paleolithic period. Despite their great age, the paintings display extraordinary artistic skill, leading many researchers to call Lascaux the Sistine Chapel of prehistoric art. Huge bulls more than 5 meters long, along with horses, deer, and mysterious symbols, fill chambers such as the famous Hall of the Bulls. The realism and scale of these images reveal a level of artistic and technical ability that continues to astonish scientists and raise new questions about the knowledge of Ice Age humans. One of the most extraordinary aspects of the Lascaux paintings is the technology behind their pigments. The colours, deep reds, yellows, blacks and browns, remain vivid even after tens of thousands of years inside a humid cave environment. In modern art conservation, pigments exposed to moisture, mineral deposits, and temperature changes often degrade within a few centuries. Yet the Lascaux colours have survived roughly 17 millennia with remarkable clarity. Chemical analyses conducted during multiple scientific campaigns in the 20th and 21st centuries, including detailed pigment studies by French archaeologists in the 1960s and later spectroscopic examinations in the 2000s, revealed that the prehistoric artists used mineral-based pigments such as iron oxide, ochre for reds and yellows, manganese dioxide for black tones, and charcoal from burned wood. These materials themselves are not mysterious. They occur naturally in many regions of Europe. What continues to puzzle researchers, however, is the way these pigments were processed and applied. Microscopic examination of pigment particles collected during early excavations revealed that many of the minerals had been ground into extremely fine powder, far finer than what would normally result from simple crushing with stone tools. Some manganese pigment fragments appear to have been deliberately selected and transported from deposits located several kilometers away from the cave. This suggests that Paleolithic artists were not simply using whatever materials were immediately available, but were actively searching for minerals with specific color properties. In some cases, the pigments appear to have been heated or chemically altered before use, which may have enhanced their color intensity or durability. Even more intriguing is the possibility that prehistoric painters mixed these powdered minerals with organic binders, such as animal fat, marrow, plant sap, or blood, to create a primitive but highly effective paint. While traces of organic compounds are difficult to preserve over thousands of years, some chemical signatures detected in microscopic samples hint that binding agents may indeed have been used. If true, this would mean that Ice Age artists understood, at least through experimentation, that mixing pigments with certain substances could make the paint adhere more effectively to stone surfaces. The durability of the Lascaux pigments becomes even more impressive when compared with many later historical artworks. Medieval frescoes painted on plaster walls in Europe often fade within several centuries if exposed to humidity, while certain Renaissance pigments degrade significantly when exposed to oxygen or light. Yet the Lascaux paintings have endured for a period nearly 100 times longer. Iron oxide pigments are naturally stable, but the extraordinary preservation suggests that the prehistoric artists also understood how to prepare surfaces and apply paint in a way that maximized longevity. Some paintings were executed directly on the limestone surface, while others were carefully placed on naturally smoother sections of rock that may have been intentionally scraped or cleaned before painting. This level of preparation indicates a sophisticated awareness of how pigment interacts with stone surfaces. Another technological puzzle concerns the application methods used inside the cave. Archaeologists studying the paintings discovered evidence that artists employed multiple techniques, including brushing, engraving, and spraying pigments onto the wall. In certain areas, particularly where hand stencils appear, as pigment was likely blown through hollow bones or reed-like tubes, essentially creating a prehistoric form of airbrush technology. This method allowed artists to produce soft gradients and fine outlines, techniques that are rarely associated with Paleolithic art in popular imagination. Some pigments were also applied using pads made of moss or fur, while other lines appear to have been drawn with sticks or primitive brushes. These varied methods suggest a surprisingly complex toolkit and artistic tradition that must have developed over generations. lighting technology inside the cave presents another layer of mystery. The deepest chambers of Lascaux are completely dark, yet many paintings appear on ceilings several meters above the ground or in narrow passages far from the entrance. Archaeologists have discovered stone lamps containing traces of burned animal fat, indicating that prehistoric visitors illuminated the cave with small controlled flames. These lamps produced relatively steady light with limited smoke, making them suitable for prolonged work inside enclosed spaces. However, painting enormous figures on ceilings up to 5 or 6 meters high would likely have required some form of scaffolding or climbing structure. Direct evidence for such structures has not survived, but the positioning of certain paintings strongly implies that artists had devised practical methods for reaching elevated surfaces. The realism of the animals depicted in the cave further highlights the intellectual sophistication of these prehistoric artists. Many figures show an understanding of movement rarely seen in ancient art. Horses appear mid-gallop, deer stretch their necks forward as if running, and some animals are drawn with multiple legs overlapping to create the illusion of motion, an effect remarkably similar to techniques used in modern animation and motion studies. This suggests that Ice Age painters possessed acute observational skills and perhaps spent significant time studying animal behavior in the wild. Given that these animals form the basis of Paleolithic hunting cultures, their detailed depiction may have held both symbolic and practical significance. Despite decades of archaeological research, the deeper purpose of the Lascaux cave paintings remains unresolved, and some scholars propose that the cave functioned as a ceremonial sanctuary where rituals related to hunting or spirituality took place. Others suggest that the images formed part of a symbolic communication system, possibly recording seasonal migrations of animals or mythological narratives. The presence of numerous abstract signs, dots, lines, branching shapes, and geometric patterns has led a few researchers to speculate that these symbols might represent one of the earliest attempts at structured symbolic communication, perhaps even a precursor to writing. Yet no definitive interpretation has gained universal acceptance. Scientific investigations of Lascaux have continued for decades. Major research campaigns occurred shortly after its discovery in the 1940s, and followed by extensive documentation efforts in the 1950s and 1960s, when scientists realized that carbon dioxide from visitors was damaging the fragile paintings. The cave was closed to the public in 1963 to preserve the artwork, and since then researchers have relied on advanced technologies such as digital scanning, high-resolution photography, and chemical pigment analysis to study the site. Modern replicas such as Lascaux II and Lascaux IV were later constructed to allow visitors to experience the cave without endangering the original paintings. Even with these modern scientific tools, many questions remain unanswered. How did Paleolithic artists develop such refined pigment technology so early in human history? How did they learn to grind minerals so finely and mix them into paints capable of surviving 17,000 years? And perhaps most intriguingly, what motivated them to create such a vast gallery of images deep inside a dark cave where few people would ever see them? The Lascaux cave paintings stand not only as a masterpiece of prehistoric art, but also as a reminder that the technological creativity of ancient humans may have been far more advanced than we once imagined. How do you think prehistoric humans were able to create pigments durable enough to survive 17,000 years inside the Lascaux cave? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The Rosetta Stone is often described as the key that unlocked the lost language of ancient Egypt. Yet beyond its famous role in deciphering hieroglyphs, the stone itself remains one of the most intriguing technological artifacts from the ancient world. Discovered in 1799 by the French officer Pierre-François Bouchard near the Egyptian town of Rosetta during the military expedition of Napoleon Bonaparte, The dark slab of granodiorite dates back to 196 BCE, during the reign of Ptolemy V. At first glance, it appears to be a relatively simple decree carved into stone, but closer inspection reveals something far more remarkable. An artifact that demonstrates an extraordinary level of linguistic organization, material engineering, and stone carving precision that still fascinates archaeologists today. The Rosetta Stone stands roughly 1 meter tall and weighs more than 700 kilograms. Its surface contains a decree issued by priests in honor of the young pharaoh Ptolemy V. What makes the inscription historically invaluable is that the same message appears in 3 different writing systems: Classical Greek, Demotic Egyptian, and the sacred hieroglyphic script used in temples and royal monuments. This triple text structure ultimately allowed the French scholar Jean-François Champollion to decipher Egyptian hieroglyphs in 1822, ending more than 15 centuries of linguistic mystery. However, while historians often focus on the linguistic breakthrough, the technical execution of the stone itself raises a different set of questions, especially regarding the astonishing precision of its engraving. The Rosetta Stone is carved from granodiorite, a dense igneous rock closely related to granite. On the Mohs hardness scale, this material ranks around 6 to 7, making it significantly harder than many types of limestone used in Egyptian monuments. Engraving detailed characters into such stone requires tools capable of repeatedly striking the surface without shattering either the tool or the stone. Yet the characters on the Rosetta Stone remain remarkably crisp. Even after more than 2,000 years, many of the grooves remain sharp enough to cast visible shadows under angled light. When researchers from the British Museum conducted microscopic surface studies in the late 20th century, they observed that the depth of many carved strokes varies by less than a millimeter. This level of uniformity suggests that the engravers worked with carefully controlled tools and a consistent carving method. To appreciate how unusual this precision is, it is useful to compare the Rosetta Stone with other inscriptions from the ancient Mediterranean world. Many Roman stone inscriptions, for example, display slight irregularities in line spacing and carving depth, especially when long texts were produced by multiple artisans. Even monumental inscriptions on marble structures, such as those found in the Roman Forum, often show subtle variations in letter proportions. By contrast, the Greek text on the Rosetta Stone appears strikingly consistent in height, alignment, and spacing. The Demotic script above it, though more fluid in style, maintains a steady baseline across hundreds of characters. And the hieroglyphic section at the top, although partially broken today, demonstrates carefully balanced symbol placement that suggests deliberate planning before any carving began. Archaeologists believe the engraving process likely began with extensive surface preparation. Before the first character was cut, the stone had to be ground into a relatively flat plane. Evidence of fine abrasion marks indicates that the artisans probably used sand or powdered quartz as an abrasive, rubbing the surface repeatedly until it became smooth enough for inscription. Only after this stage would scribes mark guidelines for the text layout. These guidelines, now barely visible, ensured that each line would remain straight and evenly spaced across the stone. Without such preparation, carving hundreds of characters onto hard stone would almost inevitably lead to drifting lines or distorted spacing. Another remarkable aspect of the Rosetta Stone is the density of information carved into its surface. The surviving inscription contains hundreds of lines of text, totaling thousands of characters across the 3 scripts. Despite this complexity, the layout remains carefully balanced. The Greek section alone contains more than 50 lines, each carved with consistent letter proportions. Modern digital measurements conducted by epigraphers show that many letters differ in height by less than 2 millimeters across the entire inscription. Such uniformity implies either a single master engraver or a highly disciplined workshop where multiple artisans followed strict guidelines. The technological question becomes even more intriguing when we consider the tools available in Ptolemaic Egypt. Bronze chisels were common during earlier periods, but bronze alone struggles to cut granodiorite effectively without frequent sharpening. Some researchers therefore suggest that the artisans may have used hardened iron tools, which were becoming increasingly common during the late 1st millennium BCE. Others argue that repeated hammering with small pointed chisels, combined with abrasive sand, could gradually carve even very hard stone. Yet no surviving workshop manuals or detailed records describe the exact techniques used by Egyptian stone engravers of this era. As a result, the full manufacturing process behind the Rosetta Stone remains partly speculative. Larger excavations and studies conducted during the 19th and 20th centuries further deepen the mystery. Scholars examining the inscription notice subtle variations between the three scripts. The Greek text appears slightly deeper and more angular, suggesting that it may have been carved first or by a different artisan. The Demotic script shows smoother curves, while the hieroglyphic section displays more pictorial symbols that required careful shaping. This raises the possibility that specialized craftsmen were assigned to each script, each trained in a particular writing tradition. If true, the Rosetta Stone would represent a collaborative project between multiple linguistic experts and stone carvers working under royal authority. The precision of the engraving also reveals something about the administrative sophistication of Ptolemaic Egypt. Producing a trilingual decree required coordination between scribes fluent in different languages. The Greek version served the ruling Macedonian elite. The Demotic script addressed the everyday Egyptian bureaucracy, and the hieroglyphic version carried sacred authority within temples. Translating the same message across these linguistic systems without major inconsistencies required careful editorial oversight. The fact that the stone's inscriptions remain largely coherent across all three scripts suggests the existence of an organized scholarly tradition capable of managing complex textual production. Over the centuries, the Rosetta Stone has suffered damage, including the loss of its upper section where additional hieroglyphs once appeared. Yet the surviving inscription still reveals the extraordinary skill of its creators. Even today, modern stonemasons admit that carving thousands of precise characters into such hard granodiorite while keeping perfect alignment would be extremely difficult, even with steel tools. More than 2,000 years ago, ancient artisans achieved this remarkable precision using techniques that historians still do not fully understand. Because of this, the Rosetta Stone is not only a key to decoding ancient Egyptian writing, but also a powerful reminder of the advanced craftsmanship of the ancient world. The methods, tools, and organization behind its creation remain questions that continue to intrigue researchers today. In your opinion, how were ancient Egyptian craftsmen able to carve thousands of precise characters into such hard granodiorite more than 2,000 years ago? What kind of technology might they have used? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The discovery of the terracotta army is often described as one of the most astonishing archaeological finds of the 20th century, not only because of its enormous scale, but also because of the technological sophistication hidden within the thousands of clay soldiers buried beneath the earth. In 1974, farmers digging a well near the outskirts of Xi'an unexpectedly struck fragments of pottery that would lead archaeologists to uncover a vast underground army guarding the tomb complex of Qin Shi Huang, the ruler who unified China more than 2,200 years ago during the Qin dynasty. What initially appeared to be a few broken statues soon revealed itself to be a monumental funerary project on a scale rarely seen in ancient history. Excavations carried out over the following decades revealed more than 8,000 life-size soldiers, over 130 chariots, 500 horses pulling war chariots, and at least 150 cavalry horses, all arranged in carefully structured military formations across several enormous pits covering tens of thousands of square meters. Yet the terracotta army is not simply remarkable for its size. The true mystery lies in the advanced craftsmanship and organizational techniques required to produce such a massive force of sculptures more than 2 millennia ago. Archaeologists quickly noticed that every warrior appeared unique. The soldiers differ in facial expression, hairstyle, posture, and armor design, with subtle variations in cheekbones, eyebrows, and even ear shapes. Detailed studies conducted by Chinese and international researchers suggest that although the figures were produced using modular molds for body parts, artisans finished each head and facial detail individually by hand. This hybrid system of mass production and customization has often been compared to modern, industrial manufacturing processes. Some scholars have even proposed that the workshops operating during the reign of Qin Shi Huang functioned almost like early assembly lines, where standardized components were produced in bulk and then assembled and refined by specialized craftsmen. Such efficiency would have been necessary to complete a project of this magnitude within the roughly 38 years between the emperor's ascension to the throne and his death in 210 BCE. Still, the most astonishing technological aspect of the terracotta army remained hidden for decades after its discovery. Today the statues appear as dull brown clay figures, but when archaeologists first uncovered them, many of the warriors still carried traces of brilliant paint. Scientific analysis revealed that the entire army had once been vividly colored, transforming the silent formation into something far more lifelike. Ancient artisans coated each statue with multiple layers of lacquer made from the sap of the lacquer tree before applying pigments that included bright reds, deep blacks, greens, blues, and even shades of purple. Among these pigments, researchers identified a particularly rare material known today as Chinese purple, a synthetic compound containing barium copper silicate. Producing this pigment required heating raw minerals to temperatures approaching 900 to 1000 degrees Celsius, a process demanding precise control of furnace conditions and chemical composition. Remarkably, this sophisticated pigment appears centuries before similar synthetic color technologies became common elsewhere in the ancient world. For comparison, many Mediterranean civilizations of the same period relied largely on naturally occurring mineral pigments such as ochre or malachite, which required far less complex processing. The existence of Chinese purple within the terracotta army has fascinated scientists because its production implies a surprisingly advanced understanding of high-temperature chemistry. Laboratory studies conducted in the 1990s and early 2000s demonstrated that the compound forms only within a narrow temperature range and requires carefully balanced mixtures of quartz, barium minerals, and copper compounds. This means that artisans during the Qin dynasty were capable of controlling kiln temperatures and chemical reactions with a level of precision that rivals early industrial experimentation. Even more intriguing is the fact that this pigment technology appears to have disappeared from use not long after the fall of the Qin Empire. The technique was effectively lost for centuries, leaving modern researchers to reconstruct the method through chemical analysis of surviving fragments. Yet the mystery deepens when archaeologists consider what happened to the original colors. When the statues were first excavated in 1974 and in subsequent digs throughout the 1980s and 2000s, the pigments began to flake and disappear almost immediately after exposure to air. Within minutes of excavation, bright reds and blues would curl away from the clay surface as the underlying lacquer layer rapidly dried and contracted. This phenomenon forced archaeologists to temporarily halt large-scale excavation in some sections, because they realized that exposing more statues without proper conservation technology would destroy the remaining traces of ancient paint. Modern teams have since developed special chemical treatments and controlled excavation techniques to preserve the pigments. But the problem illustrates how complex and delicate the original painting system truly was. The multi-layered lacquer base, organic binders and mineral pigments formed a fragile technological combination that modern science still struggles to stabilize once removed from its underground environment. In addition to their colors, the warriors were equipped with real weapons made from bronze, including swords, spears, crossbow triggers, and arrowheads. Many of these weapons were discovered in remarkably good condition, with sharp edges and minimal corrosion even after more than 2 millennia underground. Early researchers believed this durability resulted from a mysterious anti-corrosion treatment involving chromium compounds, a technology thought to be thousands of years ahead of its time. Later studies suggested that traces of chromium may actually have originated from lacquer coatings used on nearby wooden weapon components, rather than intentional metal plating. Even so, the preservation of these weapons still raises questions about the burial environment and metallurgical practices of Qin-era craftsmen. Further mysteries remain beneath the central mound of the mausoleum itself. Historical records written by the Han Dynasty historian Sima Qian describe the emperor's tomb as containing elaborate mechanical traps and miniature rivers of liquid mercury representing the great waterways of China. Modern soil surveys around the mound have indeed detected unusually high concentrations of mercury, lending some credibility to these ancient accounts. However, archaeologists have so far refrained from opening the main burial chamber, fearing that excavation could damage whatever fragile artifacts or technological secrets might still lie inside. More than 50 years after its discovery in 1974, the Terracotta Army still challenges our understanding of ancient engineering and craftsmanship. Excavations carried out in 1974, 1986, and in the early 21st century have revealed only part of the vast complex. Each discovery deepens the mystery of how such a massive and technologically advanced project was completed in the 3rd century BCE. From the enormous scale of the underground army to the lost chemical secrets behind its vivid pigments, the Terracotta Army suggests that ancient civilizations may have possessed knowledge far more advanced than we once believed, and perhaps its greatest secrets still lie buried beneath the earth surrounding the tomb of Qin Shi Huang. Why do you think the technology used to create the vivid colors on the warriors of the Terracotta Army disappeared after the Qin dynasty? Was it a lost secret of ancient craftsmanship? Or is it a technique we still do not fully understand today? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Rising from the dense coastal jungle of northern Belize, near the waters of Chetumal Bay, the ancient Maya city of Cheros archaeological site holds one of the most visually striking and technologically puzzling artistic traditions of the pre-classic Maya world, the colossal Cheros pyramid masks. These enormous sculpted faces, attached directly to the sides of stepped pyramids, were constructed more than 2,000 years ago, most of them dating between roughly 400 BCE and 100 BCE. At first glance, they appear to be monumental religious decorations, possibly representing solar deities or mythological beings tied to Maya cosmology. Yet closer examination reveals something far more intriguing. The masks are not carved from solid stone like the monumental sculptures of later Maya cities. Instead, they were carefully formed from stucco, a lime-based plaster mixture applied over stone cores, and despite being composed of what should be a relatively fragile material exposed to tropical rain, humidity and erosion for over 2 millennia, many of these masks still retain remarkable structural integrity and visible detail. This unexpected durability has become one of the most fascinating technological mysteries surrounding the site. The masks themselves are enormous. Individual examples discovered on the pyramid known as Structure 5 C-second measure, roughly 2 to 3 meters high and up to 4 meters wide. forming symmetrical pairs along the stairways of the pyramid. Each mask displays elaborate iconography, curling fangs, stylized eyes, complex headdresses, and geometric ornamentation that likely symbolized aspects of Maya mythology or the daily journey of the sun. Archaeologists working at Keros during excavations in the 1970s and 1980s, particularly under the direction of researchers such as David Friedel, documented several of these masks while investigating the pyramid's multiple construction phases. Their discoveries showed that the pyramid had been rebuilt repeatedly, with newer layers covering older structures, effectively sealing earlier masks inside the pyramid. This practice, common in Maya architecture, means that some masks remain buried within the structure even today, preserved but largely inaccessible to direct study. What makes these masks particularly extraordinary is the material technology used to create them. Maya stucco was produced by burning limestone to create quicklime, which was then mixed with water and aggregates to produce a workable plaster. Modern experiments suggest that producing lime requires temperatures of approximately 800 to 900 degrees Celsius, a level of heat that demands sustained, controlled firing. For a civilization working without metal furnaces or industrial kilns, generating such temperatures in large quantities would have required carefully designed firing pits or kilns and significant amounts of fuel. Estimates suggest that producing enough stucco to coat a large pyramid facade could have required hundreds of tons of limestone and thousands of kilograms of wood fuel. Considering that Saros was not an enormous metropolis, its population during the pre-classic period may have been only 1,000 to 2,000 inhabitants. The scale of resource management and labour organisation implied by these stucco constructions raises major questions about the social and technological capabilities of the community. The durability of the Saros stucco is especially puzzling when compared to other ancient plaster traditions. In many tropical archaeological sites, lime plaster erodes rapidly once exposed to rain and humidity. Yet at Saros, certain masks have survived with crisp edges and recognisable facial features after more than 2,000 years. By contrast, many stucco surfaces in other Maya cities such as Tikal or Palenque often deteriorated more severely when exposed. Even where stucco masks exist elsewhere, such as at Ouarzaqtoun, they are usually smaller or more fragmentary. The examples at Saros remain unusually large and comparatively well preserved. Some researchers have suggested that the Maya may have used multiple layers of plaster, each carefully smoothed and dried before the next was applied, creating a dense composite material. Others propose that organic additives, possibly plant resins, fibres or ash, may have been mixed into the plaster to improve cohesion and resistance to cracking. However, chemical analyses of surviving fragments have not yet produced a definitive explanation for the mask's remarkable resilience. Another intriguing possibility lies in the firing and preparation of the lime itself. If the limestone used at Saros was burned at slightly higher temperatures or for longer durations than typical Maya lime production, it might have produced a stronger, more reactive quicklime. Once mixed with water and carbon dioxide from the air, the lime would gradually recrystallize into calcium carbonate, effectively turning the plaster back into a stone-like substance. Over centuries, this process could have strengthened the material further, yet producing lime at such controlled conditions would require a surprisingly sophisticated understanding of combustion, fuel management and material behaviour, knowledge that is difficult to reconstruct from the archaeological record alone. Excavations have also revealed that the masks were not simple flat surfaces, but complex sculptural forms built over stone frameworks. The artisans first constructed the underlying structure from shaped stones, then applied thick stucco layers, sometimes 10 to 20 centimetres thick, which were carved and smoothed while still wet. This allowed sculptors to create dramatic facial expressions and deeply recessed features. In some cases, traces of pigment indicate that the masks were once brightly painted, possibly in reds, yellows and blues derived from mineral and organic pigments. Imagine the visual impact. Towering pyramids covered with vividly coloured deity faces glowing under the tropical sun. The result would have been an architectural spectacle designed to inspire awe among visitors and pilgrims arriving by sea through Chetumal Bay. Yet the technological puzzle remains. How did a relatively small coastal community manage to produce such massive quantities of lime plaster? How did they coordinate the labour required to quarry limestone, burn it, transport materials and sculpt enormous masks across multiple construction phases? And perhaps most puzzling of all, how did their stucco achieve such long-term durability in an environment that normally destroys plaster within centuries? Modern conservation scientists studying Maya stucco continue to investigate these questions using microscopic analysis and chemical testing. While progress has been made, no single theory yet explains why the Serros masks have endured so well. Today, the Serros pyramid masks remain a testament to the remarkable engineering skills of the ancient Maya. Despite decades of research, the secret that allowed these massive stucco masks to survive for more than 2,000 years is still not fully understood. Deep in the jungles of Belize, they continue to gaze outward from the pyramids, silent traces of a lost ancient technology. What do you think allowed the massive stucco masks at Serros archaeological site to survive for more than 2,000 years in such a harsh tropical environment? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Among the many surviving artifacts of the Roman Empire, few objects challenge our understanding of ancient technology as dramatically as the Lycurgus cup, a remarkable glass vessel believed to have been crafted during the 4th century CE. At first glance, it appears to be a masterpiece of Roman decorative art, carved with extraordinary detail and depicting a dramatic mythological scene. Yet beneath its beauty lies a technological mystery that has fascinated scientists, archaeologists, and historians for decades. Today the cup is preserved in the British Museum in London, where it continues to puzzle researchers because of a unique optical phenomenon that seems almost impossible for ancient craftsmen to have intentionally created. When illuminated from the front, the cup appears a rich jade green. But when light shines through the glass from behind, the entire vessel transforms into a glowing deep red, almost like illuminated wine. This remarkable effect, known as dichroic glass, occurs when materials interact with light in complex ways, allowing certain wavelengths to pass through while reflecting others. For centuries, the mechanism behind this transformation remained unexplained, and many scholars initially assumed it must have been the accidental result of impurities in the glass. However, modern scientific investigation has revealed something far more astonishing. The colour-changing effect is produced by microscopic particles of precious metals embedded within the glass itself. The cup takes its name from the mythological scene carved into its surface, which shows the punishment of King Lycurgus of Thrace. According to Greek mythology, Lycurgus attacked Dionysus, the god of wine, and the gods retaliated by trapping him in vines that slowly imprisoned him. Roman glass artisans carved this dramatic moment into the vessel in a style so detailed that the figures seem almost sculptural, emerging from the glass in high relief. Technically, the object belongs to an extremely rare class of Roman luxury glass known as a cage cup, or diatretum. In these vessels, the outer decorative lattice is carved directly from the same piece of glass as the inner cup, creating a delicate open framework surrounding the vessel like a floating cage. This technique required extraordinary skill because the entire structure had to be cut from a single block of glass without breaking the fragile connections between the inner and outer layers. Archaeological discoveries suggest that fewer than 50 such cage cups have survived from the Roman world, many discovered in elite burial contexts from the 3rd and 4th centuries CE in regions such as Cologne along the Rhine frontier and parts of northern Italy. However, the Lycurgus cup is the only known example that combines this rare carving technique with the mysterious colour-changing glass. The most extraordinary feature of the Lycurgus cup, however, lies in the astonishing sophistication of the glass manufacturing process itself. For many years, scholars assumed that Roman artisans could not possibly have controlled the microscopic structure of glass in such a precise way. Yet detailed scientific analysis conducted in 1990 by researchers at IBM and Cambridge University revealed that the glass contains extremely small particles of gold and silver, measuring roughly 50 to 100 nanometers in diameter. To understand just how small this is, a single human hair is roughly 70,000 nanometers wide, meaning these particles are about 1,000 times smaller than the thickness of a hair. At this nanoscale level, metals interact with the light in unusual ways, scattering some wavelengths while absorbing others. This interaction causes the glass to appear green when light reflects from the surface and red when light passes through it. In modern materials science, this phenomenon is studied under the field of nanoplasmonics, a branch of nanotechnology that only emerged in the late 20th century. Yet Roman artisans managed to create this effect nearly 16 centuries earlier. What makes this discovery even more astonishing is the extreme precision required to produce the effect. Chemical analysis of the glass shows that the concentration of metals is incredibly small yet carefully balanced, roughly 0.01% gold and 0.02% silver dispersed throughout the glass matrix. If the proportions were even slightly different, the optical effect would disappear entirely. Modern laboratories attempting to recreate dichroic glass must control furnace temperatures, metal concentrations, and cooling conditions with sophisticated equipment. Even today, it can be difficult to achieve a perfectly uniform distribution of nanoparticles throughout molten glass. Yet Roman glassmakers, working with furnaces heated by wood or charcoal and relying entirely on manual techniques, somehow produced a material whose microscopic structure behaves like a modern engineered optical system. Some researchers believe this effect may have been discovered accidentally when metal contaminants entered the glass mixture. However, the even distribution of particles throughout the Lycurgus cup suggests a surprising level of control during the melting and cooling process. The artisans who created it may not have understood nanotechnology in a theoretical sense, but their craftsmanship achieved a result remarkably similar to modern nanoscale engineering. Archaeological evidence indicates that Roman glassmakers possessed highly advanced knowledge of their craft. Excavations of Roman glass workshops across the Mediterranean, including sites in Alexandria, Syria, and the Rhineland, reveal furnaces capable of reaching temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius, along with specialized crucibles used to melt silica sand, soda, and lime into glass. By the 1st century CE, the Romans had already revolutionized glass production through the invention of glass blowing, allowing vessels to be produced faster and in greater numbers than ever before. Yet luxury pieces such as cage cups required an entirely different level of skill, involving careful carving and polishing long after the glass had cooled. The Lycurgus cup therefore represents a fusion of multiple advanced techniques: sophisticated glass chemistry, precise sculptural carving, and optical properties that rival modern engineered materials. The history of the artifact itself adds another layer of mystery. Although its exact discovery location remains uncertain, historical records suggest that the cup appeared in a private European collection during the 19th century, before eventually being acquired by the British Museum in 1958, with assistance from the Art Fund and the Victoria and Albert Museum. Only decades later did scientists begin to analyse the material closely. revealing the presence of nanoscale metal particles responsible for its dramatic color shift. Well, each new study has reinforced the same conclusion. The Lycurgus Cup demonstrates a level of material sophistication in the Roman world that historians once believed impossible. While Roman engineering achievements are usually associated with roads, aqueducts, and monumental architecture, this delicate glass vessel reveals a different side of ancient innovation, one that operates on a scale invisible to the naked eye. More than 16 centuries after it was created, the Lycurgus Cup continues to challenge modern assumptions about ancient technology. Whether its remarkable properties were the result of deliberate experimentation or a fortunate accident that Roman artisans learned to reproduce remains unknown. What is clear, however, is that the cup embodies a technological mystery that bridges the ancient and modern worlds. In a time long before microscopes or nanotechnology laboratories existed, Roman craftsmen produced a material whose behavior mirrors some of the most advanced optical materials studied by scientists today. The Lycurgus Cup therefore stands not only as a masterpiece of Roman art, but also as a powerful reminder that the technological capabilities of ancient civilizations may still hold secrets waiting to be rediscovered. Do you think the strange color-changing effect of the Lycurgus Cup was the result of a highly advanced glass-making technology intentionally developed by the Romans, or was it simply a remarkable accident discovered during the crafting process? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Few places in the world illustrate the sudden collapse of a powerful city quite like Port Royal, Jamaica. Once described by contemporaries as the richest and wickedest city in the New World, this Caribbean port flourished during the late 17th century as a hub of trade, privateering, and naval power. Yet today, much of the city lies silently beneath the waters of Kingston Harbour, preserved in mud like a time capsule. What makes Port Royal particularly fascinating to historians and archaeologists is not only the dramatic catastrophe that sank it in 1692, but also the remarkably advanced harbour engineering and urban construction techniques that allowed such a sophisticated port city to exist on a fragile strip of sand, even centuries later, where some aspects of the city's infrastructure and engineering choices remain difficult for scientists to fully explain. Port Royal was established by the English in 1655 after they captured Jamaica from Spain. Its location at the end of the Palisadoes, a narrow sand spit guarding the entrance to Kingston Harbour, made it a strategically perfect maritime base. By the 1670s and 1680s, the city had grown into one of the busiest ports in the Americas. Historical records suggest that the population reached 6,500 to 7,000 residents, an enormous number for a colonial settlement of the time. The city contained warehouses, taverns, merchant houses, shipyards, and fortifications, and serving as both a legitimate trading centre and a base for privateers such as the famous Sir Henry Morgan. However, the true marvel of Port Royal lay beneath its bustling streets, the infrastructure of its harbour. Unlike many colonial settlements that developed gradually with simple wooden docks, Port Royal appears to have been built with a surprisingly organised maritime design. Archaeological surveys have revealed evidence of large wharves, reinforced piers, and extensive waterfront storage complexes, indicating that the city functioned as a carefully planned commercial port rather than merely a pirate haven. Wooden pilings driven deep into the seabed supported massive docking structures capable of handling heavily loaded merchant ships arriving from Europe and the Spanish Main. Some docks were reportedly built using oak and lignum vitae, woods known for their extraordinary resistance to rot and marine organisms. Excavations conducted by underwater archaeologists in the 1960s and 1970s, particularly by Edwin and Marion Link, documented sections of these wharf structures still embedded in the seabed more than 3 centuries later. What astonishes researchers is the fact that these heavy port facilities were constructed on a foundation composed largely of loose sand and sediment. Modern engineers know that such terrain is extremely unstable, particularly in seismically active regions. Normally, large stone or brick buildings require stable bedrock or deep foundations. Yet Port Royal featured multi-storey brick warehouses, some weighing hundreds of tons, standing directly adjacent to the shoreline. Archaeological mapping of the submerged city has revealed rows of buildings aligned with the waterfront, forming an organised grid system of streets and docks. This layout resembles the commercial port structures seen in European cities such as London or Amsterdam, suggesting that British engineers attempted to replicate advanced harbour designs from the old world in a colonial environment that was geologically far less stable. The mystery deepens when considering the catastrophic event that ended Port Royal's golden age. On June 7th, 1692, a powerful earthquake estimated at magnitude 7.5 struck the region. According to contemporary accounts, the ground began to ripple like waves, buildings cracked apart, and within minutes large sections of the city simply collapsed into the sea. Approximately 2/3 of Port Royal sank beneath the water and nearly 2,000 people were killed. The phenomenon responsible for this destruction is now believed to be soil liquefaction, in which water-saturated sand temporarily loses its strength during intense shaking. However, the exact mechanics of the disaster remain a subject of ongoing research. What makes the event particularly intriguing is that many parts of the city did not disintegrate completely. Instead, entire streets and buildings appear to have slid downward almost intact, settling under 10 to 15 meters of water. Underwater surveys have discovered houses still standing upright, their walls leaning at strange angles but largely preserved. In some locations, archaeologists found objects exactly where they'd been left moments before the earthquake. Bottles on tavern tables, clay pipes scattered across floors, and merchant goods still stacked in storerooms. Because the buildings collapsed rapidly into soft mud, oxygen was largely excluded from the site, creating an environment that preserved organic materials unusually well. For this reason, scholars often refer to Port Royal as the underwater Pompeii of the Caribbean. Beginning in the 1950s and expanding through the 1970s and 1980s, underwater excavations uncovered thousands of artifacts that shed light on life in the city before the disaster. Researchers recovered ceramic dishes from England, glassware from Venice, coins from Spain, navigational instruments, weapons, and even fragments of clothing. More than 750,000 individual artifacts have reportedly been catalogued from the site. Detailed mapping using sonar and underwater photography has revealed an extensive portion of the old waterfront district, including sections of streets, building foundations, and dock infrastructure. These discoveries confirm that Port Royal was not simply a chaotic pirate town, but a sophisticated maritime centre with carefully engineered logistics systems. The harbour structures themselves remain one of the most puzzling elements of the site. Evidence suggests that engineers used dense wooden pilings, driven several metres into the seabed, forming a lattice capable of supporting docks and heavy cargo platforms. This technique resembles harbour construction methods used in 17th century Dutch ports, where timber piles stabilised waterfront structures built over soft sediments. Yet implementing such techniques on a remote Caribbean sandbar would have required extensive planning, specialised labour, and a deep understanding of maritime engineering. Considering the technological limitations of the time, it is remarkable that the infrastructure functioned effectively for nearly 4 decades before the earthquake struck. Comparisons with other ancient harbour sites highlight how unusual Port Royal's engineering truly was. For example, the famous Roman harbour at Caesarea Maritima in Israel used hydraulic concrete to stabilise its breakwaters, So, while Mediterranean ports such as Alexandria relied on massive stone blocks placed on relatively stable seabeds, Port Royal, by contrast, attempted to support an entire urban waterfront on a shifting sand formation exposed to earthquakes and tropical storms. From a modern perspective, the decision seems dangerously risky, yet the port operated successfully as one of the most active trade centres in the Caribbean for decades. Today, large portions of Port Royal remain unexplored beneath layers of sediment. Modern research using side-scan sonar, magnetometers, and digital three-dimensional mapping has revealed that only a fraction of the submerged city has been systematically excavated. Archaeologists believe that entire districts of the original port, including additional warehouses, ships, and dock complexes, may still lie buried beneath the harbour floor. Each new survey reinforces the idea that Port Royal represents one of the most important underwater archaeological sites in the Western Hemisphere. Ultimately, the story of Port Royal is not just about pirates and disaster. It is a story of ambitious engineering carried out in a challenging environment, where colonial builders attempted to recreate advanced European harbour systems on unstable tropical terrain. The city's sudden destruction froze that experiment in time, leaving behind a submerged landscape that continues to puzzle scientists. More than 3 centuries after the earthquake, yet the silent ruins beneath Kingston Harbour still raise a fascinating question. How did a thriving port city with such advanced maritime infrastructure flourish for decades on ground that nature would ultimately reclaim in a matter of minutes? The San Bartolo murals are widely considered one of the most astonishing artistic and technological discoveries associated with the ancient Maya civilization. Hidden for more than 2 millennia inside a pyramid structure deep in the tropical forests of northern Guatemala, these murals offer a rare glimpse into the intellectual, artistic, and technological sophistication of the Maya during the late pre-classic period. Their discovery in 2001 by a research team led by the archaeologist William Saturno dramatically changed scholarly understanding of early Maya culture. Before this discovery, many researchers believed that complex Maya mythology, writing systems, and elaborate artistic traditions did not fully develop until the Classic period, roughly after 250 CE. However, the San Bartolo murals, radiocarbon dated to approximately 100 BCE to 100 CE, demonstrated that highly advanced artistic and symbolic traditions already existed centuries earlier. The murals were discovered inside a small chamber within a pyramid structure known as Las Pinturas. Ironically, the discovery occurred only because looters had previously tunneled into the structure in search of artifacts. While investigating the damage caused by these illegal excavations, Saturno noticed fragments of painted plaster on the tunnel walls. Subsequent archaeological excavations revealed entire sections of brilliantly preserved mural paintings covering the interior walls of the chamber. These paintings extend across several meters of wall space and depict complex mythological scenes involving Maya gods, ritual offerings, and cosmological symbolism. The artistic style is strikingly sophisticated. Figures are rendered with dynamic movement, carefully proportioned anatomy, and intricate decorative elements, suggesting that the artists responsible for the murals possessed highly developed technical skills and possibly specialized artistic training. Some individual brushstrokes measure only a few millimeters in width, indicating the use of extremely fine painting tools. However, among the many remarkable aspects of the San Bartolo murals, one feature stands out as particularly mysterious to modern researchers: the extraordinary durability of their pigments. Despite being more than 2,000 years old and located in a humid tropical environment that typically destroys organic materials rapidly, many of the mural colours remain vivid and recognizable. This durability is especially evident in the pigments used to produce red, yellow, black, white, and the famous Maya blue, a pigment that has fascinated chemists and archaeologists for decades. The reds were typically derived from hematite-based iron oxides, while yellows often came from ochre minerals. Black pigments were likely produced from carbon-based materials such as charcoal or soot, and white was created from finely processed lime plaster. Yet it is the blue pigment that has generated the most scientific intrigue. Maya blue is widely regarded as one of the most chemically stable pigments ever developed by any ancient civilization. Modern laboratory experiments have shown that it is remarkably resistant to acids, solvents, heat, humidity, and biological degradation. In some controlled tests, samples of Maya blue remained stable even after exposure to nitric acid and temperatures exceeding 150 degrees Celsius. This level of chemical stability is extraordinary, especially considering that the pigment was developed long before the emergence of modern chemistry. The pigment itself is produced through a combination of indigo dye, derived from plant sources, and a rare clay mineral known as palygorskite. When heated together under specific conditions, the indigo molecules become trapped within the microscopic channels of the clay structure, forming a hybrid pigment with exceptional durability. What remains mysterious, however, is how ancient Maya artisans discovered and perfected this process. Replicating Maya blue in modern laboratories has shown that the mixture must typically be heated to temperatures ranging between approximately 150 and 200 degrees Celsius in order to stabilize the pigment structure. Achieving and controlling such temperatures would normally require specialized kilns or carefully managed heating systems. Yet there is still limited archaeological evidence that the Maya possessed industrial-style furnaces designed specifically for pigment production during the late Preclassic period. Some researchers speculate that the pigment may have been accidentally discovered during ritual incense burning, in which indigo-dyed textiles or plant materials were heated together with palygorskite clay. Others suggest that the Maya may have deliberately experimented with heating mixtures in ceramic vessels. Despite numerous chemical studies conducted since the 1960s, the exact method used by ancient artisans to produce large quantities of stable Maya blue remains uncertain. The San Bartolo murals provide some of the earliest surviving examples of this pigment in use. Chemical analysis of pigment samples taken from the murals has confirmed the presence of palygorskite-based Maya blue, indicating that the technology was already well developed by the late Preclassic period. This discovery significantly pushed back the known history of Maya blue production by several centuries. Prior to the San Bartolo excavations, the pigment was most famously associated with later Maya sites, such as Chichen Itza, where it was used in ritual contexts including sacrificial ceremonies at the sacred cenote. The presence of the pigment at San Bartolo demonstrates that this sophisticated chemical technology was already in use long before the rise of major Classic period Maya cities. Beyond the pigments themselves, the techniques used to apply them also remain a subject of ongoing research. The murals were painted onto carefully prepared layers of lime plaster that had been smoothed to a near-polished surface. This preparation resembles fresco techniques later used in Mediterranean cultures, though the Maya method appears to have developed independently. In some areas of the murals, multiple layers of pigment were applied to achieve shading and depth, suggesting that the artist possessed an advanced understanding of color layering and visual composition. The careful preparation of the plaster base may have also contributed to the remarkable preservation of the paintings. Another fascinating aspect of the murals is their narrative complexity. Rather than isolated decorative images, the paintings form an integrated visual story that appears to represent elements of early Maya creation mythology. Scenes depict maize gods, ritual blood offerings, sacred trees, and royal figures performing ceremonial acts. Some scholars believe the murals represent one of the earliest visual depictions of the Maya creation narrative, later recorded in the Popol Vuh, though interpretations remain debated. The organization of the scenes across the walls suggests careful planning, possibly following symbolic cosmological directions associated with Maya religious beliefs. Archaeological research at San Bartolo has continued for more than 2 decades, with excavations revealing additional structures, murals, and artifacts that help contextualize the site within the broader development of Maya civilization. Radiocarbon dating of organic materials from the pyramid construction layers has consistently confirmed the late preclassic chronology of the murals. Excavations have also shown that the pyramid containing the murals was intentionally buried beneath later construction phases, a common practice in Maya architecture in which new buildings were constructed directly on top of older ones. This practice may have inadvertently protected the murals from environmental exposure for centuries, as despite decades of research, many questions remain unresolved. How did the ancient Maya discover the chemical process needed to create Maya blue? What tools allowed artists to produce such precise lines and delicate details? And what deeper meanings are hidden within the mythological scenes on the walls? The San Bartolo murals remain not only a remarkable work of ancient art, but also a reminder that the technological knowledge of early civilizations may have been far more advanced and mysterious than we once believed. How do you think the ancient Maya discovered the technology to create the incredibly durable Maya blue pigment? Was it the result of advanced scientific knowledge, generations of experimentation, or simply an accidental discovery? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Hidden deep within the ancient Maya city of the Temple of the Inscriptions lies one of the most discussed artifacts in the study of ancient civilizations. The monumental stone lid known today as the Palanque astronaut relief. This extraordinary carving seals the sarcophagus of the Maya ruler Kinich Janab Pakal, whose tomb was discovered in 1952 by Mexican archaeologist Alberto Ruz-Luillier. When Ruz first ascended a long staircase buried beneath centuries of debris inside the pyramid, he uncovered something no one expected: a sealed burial chamber containing a massive limestone sarcophagus covered by a single stone lid, carved with one of the most intricate relief compositions ever produced in the ancient Americas. Measuring approximately 3.8 meters long and 2.2 meters wide, and weighing an estimated 5 to 6 tons, the slab is not merely a funerary lid, but a masterpiece of engineering, logistics, and symbolic design. While the imagery has generated endless speculation, including comparisons to a modern astronaut seated inside a machine, the most remarkable mystery may not be the iconography itself, but rather how such a colossal stone object was quarried, transported, carved, and installed deep inside a pyramid more than 13 centuries ago. The first challenge begins with the stone itself. The lid was carved from a single block of fine limestone, a material commonly used throughout the Maya region, but rarely manipulated at such a massive scale with this level of precision. Even archaeological analysis suggests the stone likely came from quarries located several kilometers from the ceremonial center of Palanque. Even today, moving a multi-ton block of limestone across uneven jungle terrain, without metal tools, wheeled vehicles, or draft animals would be a complex engineering task. Yet the ancient Maya accomplished this centuries before modern mechanical equipment existed. Researchers studying Maya construction techniques estimate that moving a 5-ton stone slab could have required dozens of workers using wooden rollers, rope systems made from plant fibers, and carefully leveled earthen ramps. Similar transportation strategies have been proposed for the movement of stones at other ancient sites such as Stonehenge and the temples of Angkor Wat, yet the logistical constraints at Palanque are arguably even more challenging because the object ultimately had to be lowered into a confined subterranean chamber inside a pyramid rather than placed in an open architectural space. What makes the situation even more puzzling is the architecture of the pyramid itself. The burial chamber containing Pakal's sarcophagus sits roughly 25 meters above the ground level of the surrounding plaza, yet it is enclosed within the structure of the temple. This means the enormous stone lid could not have been carried into the chamber after the pyramid was fully completed. Archaeologists therefore believe the sarcophagus and its lid were installed during an early stage of construction, after which the pyramid was gradually built around the tomb. Evidence supporting this theory comes from the internal staircase discovered by Ruse Lewillier, which had been intentionally filled with rubble and sealed after the burial ceremony. The staircase suggests that workers needed a temporary access route to transport materials into the chamber before the structure was finalized. Even with such access, however, maneuvering a multi-ton stone slab through narrow corridors and lowering it precisely onto the sarcophagus would have required careful planning and coordination. Comparisons with other ancient construction projects highlight just how remarkable this feat may be. In Egypt, the granite sarcophagi of the Serapeum of Saqqara weigh far more, sometimes over 60 tons, but they were installed in large underground galleries that allowed more space for movement. By contrast, the burial chamber at the Temple of the Inscriptions measures only a few meters across, leaving very little margin for error during installation. Some researchers propose that the Maya builders may have used earthen ramps combined with lever systems, slowly lowering the lid into place with ropes while workers stabilized it from multiple sides. Experimental archaeology suggests that such systems could theoretically move objects of similar mass, but the precise method used at Palenque remains uncertain because no direct written description of the process survives. Once the massive stone block had been positioned, an even more extraordinary stage of work began. The carving of the relief itself. The surface of the lid is covered by an elaborate composition representing Pakal in a cosmological scene involving the Maya world tree, ye celestial symbols and mythological creatures. Hundreds of individual elements, including glyphs, serpents, and decorative scrolls, are arranged in an intricate layout that scholars have studied for decades. High-resolution scans of the relief reveal that many lines are only a few millimeters wide yet maintain consistent depth and precision across the entire slab. Achieving such accuracy without metal chisels would have required tools made from harder stones, such as obsidian or chert, along with abrasion techniques using sand and water. The level of craftsmanship has often been compared to the finest bas-reliefs of ancient Mesopotamia or the stone carvings of Angkor, demonstrating that Maya artisans possessed both artistic skill and technical discipline equal to other great civilizations of the ancient world. Archaeological investigations conducted since the tomb's discovery have continued to shed light on this extraordinary artifact. In the 1990s and early 2000s, conservation teams used laser scanning and digital modelling to document every detail of the relief in order to monitor erosion and structural stress. These studies confirmed that the lid was carved with remarkable geometric planning. The central figure and surrounding motifs align along carefully balanced axes that suggest the design was mapped out before carving began. Excavations around Palenque have also uncovered workshops and unfinished stone pieces, indicating that the city supported specialized artisans capable of handling large-scale sculptural projects. Yet despite decades of research, many aspects of the engineering process remain uncertain. Today, the Palenque astronaut relief continues to fascinate historians, archaeologists, and enthusiasts of ancient mysteries. Although modern scholars interpret the scene as a symbolic depiction of Pakal's journey through the Maya cosmos, rather than evidence of extraterrestrial technology, the technical achievement behind the artifact remains extraordinary. Quarrying, transporting, carving, and installing a multi-ton stone slab deep inside a pyramid required remarkable planning and coordination. More than 1,300 years later, the lid still rests exactly where Maya builders placed it, standing as a testament to the ingenuity and advanced craftsmanship of this ancient civilization. How do you think the ancient Maya managed to transport and precisely place a multi-ton stone deep inside a pyramid more than 1,300 years ago? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The Bhimbetka cave paintings, located within the vast sandstone formations of the Bhimbetka rock shelters in central India, represent one of the most extraordinary collections of prehistoric art ever discovered. Spread across more than 700 rock shelters, with roughly 400 containing visible paintings, the site preserves an artistic record spanning an immense stretch of human history. Archaeological research suggests that some of the earliest paintings may date back over 30,000 years, while others were added during the Mesolithic, Chalcolithic, and even early historic periods. This means Bhimbetka functioned as a continuously used artistic landscape for tens of millennia. The shelters themselves were first brought to international scientific attention in 1957, when Indian archaeologist V.S. Wakankar reportedly noticed unusual rock formations from a train and later explored the region in detail. Subsequent archaeological surveys conducted by the Archaeological Survey of India uncovered hundreds of painted panels depicting animals, hunting scenes, ritual dances, and symbolic figures. These discoveries eventually led to the site being recognized by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site in 2003. Yet despite decades of research, Bhimbetka continues to raise difficult questions about the technological abilities of the prehistoric artists who created these images. One of the most striking characteristics of the Bhimbetka paintings is their remarkable durability. Even after tens of thousands of years, many figures remain clearly visible, particularly those painted in deep red or reddish-brown tones. Scientific analysis indicates that these pigments were primarily derived from hematite, an iron-rich mineral that produces a strong red colour when ground into powder. Other colours, including white and yellow, appear to have been made from kaolin clay, limestone, and natural earth pigments. What makes the paintings unusual is the way these pigments have adhered to the sandstone surfaces for such an immense span of time. In many cases, the colour appears to have penetrated microscopic pores in the rock, creating a bond that has resisted rain, wind erosion, and dramatic climatic shifts. Some researchers have suggested that prehistoric artists may have mixed pigments with organic binders such as plant resin, animal fat, or tree sap, creating a primitive but surprisingly durable paint mixture. However, all because organic compounds degrade over thousands of years, determining the exact chemical recipe has proven extremely difficult. When compared with other famous cave art sites such as Lascaux Cave in France or Altamira Cave, the Bhimbetka paintings show a similar reliance on mineral pigments, yet the environmental conditions are very different. European cave paintings are often located deep inside enclosed chambers, protected from sunlight and weather, while many Bhimbetka paintings are exposed on open rock surfaces. Despite this exposure, many of the images have survived for thousands of years, raising questions about how prehistoric artists achieved such stability in their pigments. Perhaps the most intriguing mystery surrounding the Bhimbetka cave paintings concerns the tools and techniques used to create them. Unlike modern paintings, which leave behind brushes, palettes, or other artistic equipment, prehistoric cave art rarely preserves the tools used by the artists. At Bhimbetka, archaeologists have found almost no direct evidence of painting instruments, leaving researchers to reconstruct the techniques indirectly from the characteristics of the images themselves. Many of the figures show remarkably controlled lines, some only a few millimeters thick. In hunting scenes, for example, The legs of animals such as deer and bison are drawn with long, continuous strokes that remain consistent in width from start to finish. Such precision suggests that the artists were not simply smearing pigment onto the rock with their fingers. Instead, they likely used some form of brush or applicator, possibly made from plant fibers, twigs, animal hair, or even feather tips. Experimental archaeology has shown that brushes made from chewed plant stems or bundles of grass can produce lines very similar to those seen in the Bhimbetka paintings. Another puzzling feature is the presence of large painted figures positioned several meters above the ground. Some of the animal depictions and human scenes appear on vertical rock faces that would have been difficult to reach without assistance. This raises the possibility that prehistoric artists constructed temporary scaffolding or used natural rock ledges to reach higher surfaces. However, because wood and plant materials decay rapidly in tropical environments, no physical remains of such structures have survived. The level of compositional planning also hints at sophisticated artistic methods. In certain shelters, archaeologists have identified multiple layers of paintings, sometimes as many as 6 or 7 distinct phases created over thousands of years. Later artists occasionally painted new scenes over earlier ones, but in many cases they carefully avoided obscuring older images. This suggests an awareness of spatial composition and perhaps even a cultural tradition of respecting earlier artwork. The precision of some images becomes even more remarkable when compared with other prehistoric art sites. In the cave paintings of Chauvet Cave, dated to roughly 32,000 years ago, artists used charcoal and shading techniques to create realistic animals. At Bhimbetka, however, many paintings rely on simple yet highly controlled outlines, demonstrating that prehistoric artists could achieve impressive accuracy with minimal tools. The existence of such refined line work raises a difficult question. How did communities without metal tools or advanced technology develop painting techniques capable of such consistency? Some researchers have proposed that the artists may have used stone grinding tools to prepare pigments, mixing powdered minerals with water or organic substances in small stone depressions. Others suggest that certain shapes may have been created using stencils or primitive blowing techniques, similar to methods found in Paleolithic caves in Europe and Indonesia. Yet none of these theories fully explains the remarkable uniformity of the lines found in several Bhimbetka panels. As a result, the exact process by which these ancient artists produced their images remains one of the site's greatest unsolved mysteries. Another fascinating aspect of Bhimbetka is the way its paintings record a long sequence of cultural changes. Archaeologists have identified several stylistic phases, beginning with large animal depictions believed to date to the Upper Paleolithic period. Later Mesolithic paintings depict smaller animals, human figures, and complex hunting scenes involving groups of archers. By the time of the Chalcolithic and early historic periods, the subject matter had evolved to include domesticated animals, riders on horseback, and ceremonial gatherings. These changes provide a visual record of how human societies in the region gradually shifted from hunter-gatherer lifestyles toward agriculture and organized communities. The presence of overlapping paintings from different periods effectively transforms the rock shelters into a layered archive of human culture spanning tens of thousands of years. The Bhimbetka cave paintings at Bhimbetka rock shelters reveal the remarkable artistic ability of prehistoric humans. The durable pigments, clear compositions, and precise lines suggest that the artists had a strong understanding of materials and painting techniques. However, because no painting tools have been discovered, scientists still do not know exactly how these artworks were created. This is why Bhimbetka remains an enduring archaeological mystery even today. If prehistoric artists created these incredibly precise paintings tens of thousands of years ago. What tools or techniques do you think they might have used? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Hidden in the harsh landscape of the Colorado Desert in southeastern California lies one of North America's most puzzling ancient creations, the Blythe intaglios. These enormous ground figures, sometimes called desert geoglyphs, stretch across the barren terrain near the Colorado River not far from the modern town of Blythe. At first glance, the desert appears empty and lifeless, but when viewed from the air, the ground suddenly reveals massive shapes, human figures, animals, and geometric patterns etched directly into the surface of the earth. The most astonishing aspect of these ancient creations is not merely their size, but the deceptively simple technique used to create them. Instead of building structures or placing stones, the creators of the Blythe intaglios formed these gigantic images simply by removing a thin layer of dark desert gravel, exposing the lighter soil beneath. With this minimal intervention, they produced figures so large that some stretch more than 50 meters in length, yet remain clearly visible even from thousands of meters above the ground. The Blythe intaglios were first discovered in 1932, when a pilot named George Palmer noticed unusual shapes while flying over the desert. From the air, the designs appeared unmistakably deliberate. One enormous human-like figure stretched across the ground, with arms and legs extended, while other nearby shapes depicted animals or abstract forms. What makes the discovery remarkable is that these images are almost impossible to recognize fully from the ground. Standing beside one of the lines, a visitor might see nothing more than shallow trenches in the desert floor, often only a few centimeters deep. Yet when viewed from above, the shallow lines form perfectly recognizable shapes. This raises an intriguing question that archaeologists continue to debate. How could ancient people design images of such enormous scale when they likely never saw them from the air? The technique used to create the Blythe intaglios appears deceptively simple. The desert surface in this region is covered by what geologists call desert pavement, a natural layer of dark, sun-baked stones that accumulate over thousands of years. Beneath this thin layer lies lighter-coloured soil. By carefully scraping away the darker stones, ancient builders created bright lines that contrasted sharply with the surrounding terrain. Each line might be only 2 to 4 centimeters deep, yet when arranged across dozens of meters they formed giant images visible from the sky. In effect, the artists were not constructing figures at all. They were revealing them by subtraction, carving massive designs out of the landscape itself. This method is strikingly similar to the technique used to create the famous Nazca lines of Peru, which were produced by removing dark stones to expose pale ground beneath. However, the Blythe intaglios demonstrate that such large-scale landscape art was not limited to South America. In fact, the Californian figures show that cultures in North America were also capable of conceptualizing designs on a scale that rivals some of the largest geoglyph traditions on Earth. Among the most impressive figures at the site is a gigantic human form measuring roughly 52 meters long, making it longer than a modern Olympic swimming pool. The proportions of the figure, its head, torso, arms and legs, are surprisingly balanced, suggesting that the designers had some method of maintaining scale and symmetry while working on the ground. Archaeologists studying aerial photographs have noted that the arms extend outward with relatively consistent angles, while the legs maintain a recognizable human shape. Creating such proportional designs across a desert surface would have required careful planning. Even a small measurement error could distort the figure dramatically over distances of tens of meters, yet the Blythe figures remain surprisingly coherent when viewed from above. One possible explanation is that ancient builders used stakes and ropes to lay out their designs, much like surveyors marking boundaries. Similar methods have been proposed for the construction of the Nazca lines. However, direct archaeological evidence for such tools at the Blythe site remains limited. No preserved wooden stakes or alignment markers have been found in situ, which leaves researchers relying largely on theoretical reconstructions. Experimental archaeologists have attempted to recreate geoglyphs using simple tools such as wooden poles, cords, and basic measurement techniques. Their results demonstrate that such methods are possible, but they also reveal how complex the process becomes when dealing with figures spanning dozens of meters. Maintaining consistent proportions across the desert would require coordinated teamwork, clear planning, and possibly a detailed design drawn on a smaller scale beforehand. The age of the Blythe intaglios is another subject of ongoing research. Archaeologists generally associate them with indigenous cultures of the lower Colorado River region, possibly the Patayan culture, which flourished in the area between approximately 2,000 and 500 years ago. Some estimates suggest the figures may date to around 700 to 900 years old, although exact dating is difficult because the geoglyphs contain no organic material that can be directly radiocarbon dated. Instead, researchers rely on indirect clues such as nearby artifacts, historical accounts from indigenous groups, and the degree of desert pavement restoration within the lines. Over time, wind and natural processes gradually reform the dark stone surface, meaning that older geoglyphs tend to accumulate new stones within their lines. By analysing this process, scientists attempt to estimate how long the designs have been exposed. Another mystery lies in the extraordinary durability of the geoglyphs. In many environments, marks scratched into soil would disappear within decades due to erosion, rainfall, and plant growth. Yet the Blythe intaglios have remained visible for centuries, possibly even millennia. The explanation likely lies in the unique stability of desert pavement. Once the top layer of stones is removed, the exposed soil becomes compacted and relatively resistant to wind erosion. Because the region receives very little rainfall, often less than 10 centimeters per year, the lines remain preserved with minimal disturbance. Even so, the continued visibility of the figures over such long periods remains remarkable. Several archaeological investigations have attempted to document and analyse the site. Surveys conducted during the mid-20th century used aerial photography to map the geoglyphs in detail. Later studies employed satellite imagery and modern mapping technologies to measure the precise dimensions and orientations of the figures. These studies revealed that the Blythe intaglios are not random shapes but carefully arranged compositions. Some figures appear aligned with nearby geographic features such as the Colorado River or nearby mountain ranges, suggesting that their placement may have held symbolic meaning. The purpose of the Blythe intaglios remains uncertain. Some researchers believe the figures were created for ceremonial or spiritual purposes, perhaps representing mythological beings or ancestral figures important to local indigenous traditions. Oral histories from tribes such as the Mojave have occasionally been interpreted as references to giant figures associated with creation stories. Others suggest that the geoglyphs may have marked sacred pathways or gathering sites for seasonal rituals. Another theory proposes that the figures functioned as territorial symbols, visible from surrounding hills or elevated vantage points. Yet even with these theories, many questions remain unanswered. Why were such enormous figures created in a place where they could not easily be seen from ground level? How did ancient designers ensure the correct proportions across distances longer than a football field? And why did they choose a technique that relied solely on removing a thin layer of desert stones, rather than constructing more durable monuments? What makes the Blythe intaglios remarkable is that these massive desert figures were created simply by removing a thin layer of stones, exposing lighter soil beneath. With lines only a few centimeters deep, ancient builders produced giant images that have survived for centuries. These geoglyphs reveal that ancient cultures likely possessed surprising knowledge of planning, geometry, and landscape design, making Blythe intaglios one of North America's most fascinating archaeological mysteries. In your opinion, how were ancient people able to create enormous figures like the Blythe intaglios simply by removing a thin layer of desert stones while still maintaining accurate proportions across dozens of meters? Share your thoughts or theories in the comments below. The mysterious bronze masks from Sanxingdui are among the most remarkable archaeological discoveries in East Asia. Buried for more than 3,000 years in the Sichuan Basin, they were brought to global attention in 1986 when Chinese archaeologists uncovered two large sacrificial pits filled with hundreds of unusual artifacts, including bronze masks with protruding eyes, statues, jade objects, and elephant tusks. The discovery challenged long-held beliefs that early Chinese civilization developed mainly along the Yellow River under cultures such as the Shang dynasty. Instead, Sanxingdui revealed a powerful and technologically advanced culture thriving in southwestern China more than 3,000 years ago, with its massive bronze masks remaining one of the most mysterious artifacts ever discovered. The masks themselves are visually shocking. Some measure more than 130 centimeters wide and weigh dozens of kilograms, yet their bronze walls are astonishingly thin, often only 3 to 5 millimeters thick. The faces are unlike any known artistic tradition from ancient China. Instead of the stylized Taoti motifs common in Shang bronze vessels, the Sanxingdui masks display enormous almond-shaped eyes that extend outward in cylindrical projections sometimes more than 15 centimeters long, sharp triangular noses, and wide ears pierced with holes that may once have held ornaments. The effect is almost surreal, as if the artisans intended to represent supernatural beings rather than human rulers. Archaeologists have proposed several theories: that the masks depict deities worshipped by the ancient Shu people, that they represent legendary rulers described in early Chinese mythology, or that they were ritual masks mounted on wooden statues during religious ceremonies. Yet despite decades of research, none of these explanations has been definitively proven. The absence of written records from the Sanxingdui culture only deepens the mystery, leaving researchers to interpret meaning through the silent language of artifacts. However, beyond their strange appearance, what truly astonishes scientists is the extraordinary technological sophistication required to produce these objects. The Sanxingdui artisans were clearly masters of bronze metallurgy. Chemical analysis has shown that the masks were cast from complex bronze alloys containing copper, tin, and lead, a combination that allowed molten metal to flow smoothly into molds while retaining structural strength after cooling. Casting objects of such large size with such thin walls would have required precise temperature control and carefully engineered molds. Even in the highly developed bronze industry of the Shang dynasty, most ritual vessels were much smaller and thicker. Producing a mask more than a meter wide with walls only a few millimeters thick, without structural collapse, would have been an enormous technical challenge. The molds themselves must have been large and extremely stable, yet archaeologists have not found clear remains of the workshops where these massive bronze objects were produced. This absence of direct evidence has left many aspects of the manufacturing process unknown. Yet perhaps the most astonishing feature of the Sanxingdui masks, and the one that has generated the greatest scientific curiosity, is the presence of ultra-thin gold coverings applied to some of the bronze faces. Several masks discovered during excavations were found with delicate sheets of gold carefully attached to the surface of the bronze, particularly around the eyes, mouth, and facial contours. These gold sheets are extraordinarily thin, in some cases measuring only about 0.02 to 0.04 millimeters thick. To visualize this scale, a typical human hair is roughly 0.07 millimeters thick, meaning the Sangsingdui gold foil could be less than half the thickness of a strand of hair. Producing metal sheets this thin requires remarkable control over hammering and annealing techniques. The gold must be repeatedly hammered, heated, and cooled to prevent cracking, all while maintaining uniform thickness. Achieving such precision more than 3,000 years ago is astonishing. Even in other advanced ancient civilizations, such as those of Mesopotamia or Egypt, gold leaf technology of comparable thinness typically appears in later historical periods. The Sangsingdui gold masks therefore suggest that the artisans of this lost culture possessed an unexpectedly advanced understanding of metalworking. The process likely involved hammering small ingots of gold into sheets before carefully attaching them to the bronze surface using adhesives or mechanical fastening methods that remain poorly understood. Some researchers have suggested that the gold sheets may have been pressed directly onto the bronze while the metal surface was slightly roughened, allowing it to adhere more effectively. Others propose that organic resins or natural adhesives may have been used, although no definitive traces have been identified. Whatever the exact method, the result created a striking visual contrast. The deep green or dark brown patina of ancient bronze surrounding a luminous golden face that would have reflected torchlight during ritual ceremonies. In the dim glow of an ancient temple, such masks must have appeared almost supernatural, reinforcing the sacred authority of the figures they represented. The importance of gold in Sangsingdui culture is further emphasized by one of the most spectacular discoveries made during recent excavations in 2021 and 2022. Archaeologists uncovered a nearly complete gold mask weighing approximately 280 grams, crafted from hammered gold sheet and originally attached to a bronze face. This mask demonstrates that gold was not merely decorative, but central to the symbolic language of Sangsingdui ritual art. Gold was rare and precious, and its use in large quantities suggests access to significant resources and trade networks, yet the exact source of the gold remains uncertain. Geological surveys have identified gold deposits in southwestern China, but it is still unclear whether the Sangsingdui people mined these resources directly or obtained them through trade with neighbouring cultures. The archaeological history of Sangsingdui itself adds another layer of intrigue. The site was first discovered in 1929 when a farmer digging an irrigation ditch unearthed a cache of jade artefacts. For decades, the find remained an isolated curiosity, but systematic excavations began in the 1980s under the supervision of Chinese archaeologists. In 1986, the discovery of the two famous sacrificial pits transformed the site into one of the most important archaeological locations in Asia. Inside these pits, researchers found more than 1,000 artifacts deliberately broken, burned, and buried. Bronze masks lay beside shattered jade blades, femi elephant tusks, and ritual trees cast entirely in bronze. The deliberate destruction of such valuable objects suggests a large-scale ceremonial event, perhaps marking the end of a religious tradition or the relocation of the city's population. Despite the wealth of artifacts recovered, many mysteries remain unsolved. No large palace complex or royal tomb associated with the creators of the masks has been conclusively identified. The city itself appears to have been suddenly abandoned around 1200 to 1100 BCE. Some scholars suggest that environmental changes, possibly an earthquake or flood that altered the course of nearby rivers, may have forced the inhabitants to relocate. Others believe that political upheaval or migration may have played a role. Whatever the cause, the disappearance of the Sangsingdui culture left behind artifacts that seem almost disconnected from the historical traditions that followed. Today, the Sangsingdui bronze masks continue to astonish both scientists and the public. Their strange faces, massive size, and sophisticated craftsmanship challenge our understanding of ancient technology. Most remarkable is the ultra-thin layer of gold that still clings to some of these faces after more than 3,000 years underground, a testament to the extraordinary skill of the Sangsingdui artisans. Even after decades of research and numerous archaeological excavations, the true story behind these masks remains one of the most fascinating mysteries of the ancient world. In your opinion, how were the ancient Sangsingdui people able to create gold layers so incredibly thin more than 3,000 years ago? Was it technology far ahead of its time, or simply a technique we still do not fully understand? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The Alta rock carvings, located in northern Norway near the modern town of Alta, along the shores of Alta Fjord, represent one of the most extraordinary and enigmatic collections of prehistoric rock art in the world. Discovered in 1972 and later designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1985, the site contains more than 6,000 individual petroglyphs carved into smooth sandstone surfaces across several areas. Archaeologists estimate that these carvings were created over a remarkably long period, beginning around 5,000 to 7,000 years ago and continuing until roughly 2,000 years ago. This immense time span means that generation after generation of prehistoric people returned to the same rocky landscapes to carve new images beside older ones. Yet despite decades of research and excavation, many aspects of the altar carvings remain deeply mysterious, particularly the deliberate arrangement of the images and the symbolic meaning behind their placement, which continues to puzzle scientists and historians alike. At first glance, the altar carvings depict scenes that seem familiar and practical: hunters pursuing reindeer, fishermen casting lines into the water, boats filled with rowers moving across the sea, and animals such as elk, bears, whales, and birds. However, as archaeologists began carefully mapping the carvings during surveys conducted in the 1970s, 1980s, and later decades, a surprising pattern emerged. The images were not randomly scattered across the rock surfaces, as might be expected if they were simply casual decorations or isolated artistic expressions. Instead, many carvings appear to be arranged in complex groupings that suggest deliberate planning. For example, in several panels, researchers discovered multiple reindeer figures aligned in the same direction, sometimes accompanied by small human figures carrying bows or spears. The positioning of these animals often resembles the movement of a migrating herd, leading some scholars to propose that the carvings may represent organized hunting strategies or seasonal migration routes known to prehistoric communities. The scale of these compositions can be striking. In one well-known panel documented during archaeological surveys in the late 20th century, more than 20 individual reindeer figures appear within a single carved scene, arranged in a pattern that resembles a coordinated herd crossing a landscape. When compared with rock art sites elsewhere in Europe, such as the cave paintings of Lascaux in France or the petroglyphs of Val Camonica in Italy, the altar scenes appear unusually narrative in character. Rather than isolated animals or symbolic figures, many altar panels seem to depict complete events or sequences, almost like a prehistoric storyboard etched into stone. This has led some researchers to suggest that the carvings may have served as a form of visual storytelling or ritual communication, possibly connected to shamanistic beliefs or communal ceremonies. Even more intriguing is the way certain types of images consistently appear together. Boats, for instance, are frequently carved in clusters, sometimes forming what looks like a fleet of vessels traveling in the same direction. Some of these boats contain multiple human figures, each represented by simple lines indicating arms raised or paddles in motion. Archaeologists studying these scenes have noted that the arrangement of the figures sometimes mirrors ethnographic accounts of Arctic hunting expeditions recorded among later northern cultures. Yet there is still no consensus on whether these images depict real journeys, mythological stories, or symbolic rituals intended to influence hunting success. The possibility that the carvings held spiritual significance becomes even more compelling when examining the human figures engaged in unusual postures. In several panels, small human shapes appear with arms extended outward or raised above their heads, and sometimes surrounded by animals or geometric patterns. These figures are often interpreted as ritual performers or shamans, individuals believed in many ancient northern cultures to act as intermediaries between the human world and the spirit world. If this interpretation is correct, the placement of these figures among hunting scenes may suggest that the carvings were not merely records of daily life, but were instead part of ceremonies intended to ensure successful hunts or maintain harmony with the surrounding environment. Archaeological research has also revealed another remarkable clue about the placement of the carvings. When scientists began studying the geological history of the region, they discovered that the land around Alta has been gradually rising since the end of the last ice age due to a process known as isostatic rebound, in which the Earth's crust slowly lifts after the weight of massive glaciers disappears. As a result, the shoreline of Alta Fjord thousands of years ago was significantly higher than it is today. Many carvings that now appear high above sea level were originally located much closer to the ancient coastline. This observation has led researchers to believe that the artists intentionally selected rock surfaces near the water where people travelling by boat or gathering along the shore would easily see the images. The placement may therefore have transformed the landscape itself into a kind of sacred ceremonial zone, where art, ritual, and daily subsistence activities merged. The mystery deepens when considering the sheer number of carvings created over time. More than 6,000 petroglyphs have been recorded, yet archaeological evidence suggests that prehistoric communities in this region were relatively small and mobile, likely consisting of hunter-gatherer groups moving seasonally between inland hunting grounds and coastal fishing areas. The fact that these groups repeatedly return to the same rocky surfaces for thousands of years indicates that Alta held a special cultural significance that endured across generations. In many cases, newer carvings were placed beside or even on top of older ones, creating layers of imagery that may represent evolving traditions or shifting symbolic meanings. Comparisons with other ancient rock art sites around the world further highlight the uniqueness of Alta's symbolic arrangement. For instance, the famous Bhimbetka cave paintings in India depict animals and humans in vivid scenes, yet the compositions there are typically confined to sheltered cave walls and do not appear to follow the same large-scale landscape planning visible in Alta. Similarly, the petroglyphs of Coso in California contain thousands of carvings, but many of them are isolated figures rather than complex narrative panels. In contrast, Alta's carvings often interact with one another across wide rock surfaces, suggesting a deliberate effort to organize images into meaningful visual relationships. Despite decades of study, however, the true meaning behind this arrangement remains elusive. Some scholars argue that the carvings functioned as a spiritual map of the landscape, marking places where important rituals occurred or where mythical events were believed to have taken place. Others suggest that the images may represent cosmological beliefs, with animals symbolizing different forces of nature or spirits associated with the Arctic environment. A more practical interpretation proposes that the carvings served as teaching tools, helping younger members of the community learn hunting techniques, seasonal movements of animals, and the traditions of their ancestors. Yet none of these theories fully explains the complexity of the Alta carvings. The careful placement of figures and repeated themes across centuries suggest a sophisticated belief system that researchers still cannot fully understand. Today, the rock surfaces still show reindeer, boats, and human figures frozen in stone. forming not only one of Northern Europe's largest collections of prehistoric rock art, but also a mystery that modern science has yet to decode. What do you think the mysterious arrangement of the Altarock carvings was really meant to represent? Ancient hunting maps, spiritual rituals, or messages from a forgotten belief system? Share your thoughts in the comments below.